Today we're just gonna be reacting and discussing this video by Gred Glintstone. We're only 5 months late, but it popped up in my feed,
Yeah, something like that.
and I started watching it, and then I was like, wow, this would be fun to discuss. And I was like, well, it'd be fun to discuss with a shiny Texan over here, as we both
Okay.
love Elden Ring. What? Would you rather go
Whoa,
by
whoa, 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 whoa. I think
Evanuel or Blade?
Blade. Okay, I think we're missing the real like meat and potatoes here. There's a new Skeeter
Yeah, don't worry about that one, chat.
Cheetah.
But I was bored and I was like, damn, it's been a while since I thought about this DLC, and this video isn't just solely about that, which I think is interesting. You ready?
hmm
All right.
Player base has become the absolute worst fan group in video games.
Due to their argumentative nature, I think FromSoft fans often missed the forest for the trees. The trial and error was extra frustration standing in the way between me and the victory screen.
In practically every interview he's ever taken since the release of Demon's Souls, Miyazaki is asked to comment on the difficulty of the Souls games, and the answer that he gives, over and over again, is that difficulty was never the point.
Meanwhile, your personal tools are stagnant, encouraging you to rely on automated elements with no skill expression to solve encounters for you.
I have never once changed my overall opinion on a single game I've played in the channel's history.
Believe it or not, I actually loved Shadow of the Erdtree.
Some people really do think I want to have my perspective ingrained on the masses and infect all conversations as an objective take. Even though I've never done that, similarly, the Great Runes are still objectively bugged to this day.
I would not recommend this DLC to any of my friends as entertainment, but I could recommend it as a dare. Another time I was taken aback by the game's laziness. Shadow of the Erdtree is the only Miyazaki-led Souls title that I wish never existed. And to clear up another thing, worst DLC yet does not mean terrible.
If you ever find yourself interacting with a
Wait, go
FromSoft
back.
fan who just dismisses
That I wish never existed. And to clear up another thing,
Okay, I thought that was
DLC
yet does
Shiakshu
not
Dash.
mean
Terrible.
If you ever find yourself interacting with a FromSoft fan who just dismisses criticism and conversation with "get good," we need to let FromSoft get good.
Mini-boss quality is terrible. Most cave or catacombs bosses are just buffed up normal enemies that don't pose much challenge, and when it's something else it's usually an NPC or a reskin Death Knight. I don't and never said that I disliked the Death Knights. I kind of liked the Death Knights. I just mentioned them in a list with the NPC bosses that I disliked and people assumed.
People who
What?
What?
Let's run it back. What?
I disliked the Death Knights. I kind of liked the Death Knights. I just mentioned them in a list with the NPC bosses that I disliked and people assumed.
people
What?
Wait.
Is she stupid?
Well, if you mention them in a list of bosses you dislike, people are gonna naturally assume you dislike them, right?
who disagree with my
Which
takes
is fine,
and put work
but-
into rebuttals and defense of a game they like. Awesome shit. Keep on it.
I don't understand. Like, people who are defending this right now are telling me the most basic bullshit that I even thought through on stream as I'm trying this. Oh, okay. It's the first thing I tried. I don't know. How about we let the game try to explain it? No, fuck the game. Because the game's gonna explain it after the fact. It doesn't make sense. The game's fucking trash.
This is a critique of critiques. Specifically, this is a critique of two critiques. Joseph Anderson's Shadow of the Erdtree video and Feeble King's critique of that critique. So this is a critique of a critique
It's a critique of a
of a
critique.
critique. It is that, sort of, but not really. It's more of a response to a style of critique that has dominated video game culture on the internet for a very long time now, and I want to talk about it. I've got some things to say. I'll be clear, when I talk about a style of critique, I don't just mean people who don't like the game that I like. This isn't about what people are saying, it is more about how they're saying it, and more importantly, what they're not saying. It's about how the role of the critic has changed and what we as the audience lose when critique is done in this way. And the hostility this sort of critique facilitates, not only between critic and audience, but audience and artist. If you don't like Shadow of the Erdtree or Elden Ring, I'm not arguing with you, you're allowed to not like it. Obviously, I'm a massive fanboy, I do challenge runs of this game, so I'm completely biased, but again, this is not a critique of the game, this is a critique of critiques. I will warn you that I'm going to criticize these critics a lot. And
Yeah, that's fine.
At times I'm going to be pretty harsh. These are some really big figures in the community, very popular, and they have been for a very long time now. I ask if you do really respect these figures to try and keep an open mind.
Has been around
I'm not
for
doing
a
this to
while.
start drama. It's not a personal attack. I'm making the video in this way because I did a lot of research on this topic and I've found some things that honestly are pretty shocking. I am not criticizing these
God
critics
damn it.
because they said mean things about my favorite game. I'm going to let Joseph Anderson, in his own words, tell you why I think it's necessary to criticize critics.
My opinion is not worth more than anyone else's, but it's undeniable that it has much more influence. My videos on Fallout 4 get so many views that just today, more people will listen to me speak my opinions on that series than most people will be listened to about anything in their entire lives. Presenting a list of unsupported opinions would not just be less interesting, it could also be harmful to how people view things, since they may take my words on faith without any evidence to properly judge whether they agree with me or not. This can lead to groups of people repeating information about something that they don't fully understand because they trusted an unsupported source.
Ain't
Our
nothing like punching
perception
a
can
robot.
be informed by critique. Easily
dude.
persuaded.
That shit feels
I'm
real
trying to
good.
persuade you right now.
No,
Run
but
away.
I-
I'm trying to manipulate you. Ooh. I talked recently about perceived stress and the scales used to measure it. One of those being mastery or perceived
Mastery defined as a sense of having control over the forces that affect one's life. Oh, I didn't know that's what it was called. That's okay.
control of the environment. I mentioned the perception of stress as being affected both by genetics and environmental influences, upbringing, and culture. If a person is playing Elden Ring and they're having a tough time with a boss, and then they go to watch a video that tells them that boss's attacks are unavoidable, how do you think that is going to affect that person's perception of control in that situation?
It's the first thing you hear about something, so it already lends you to have a negative impression of something before you even touch it, hypothetically. So that's
It's really like any like anytime you go into a Souls game for the first time, it was really like, oh my gosh, it's super hard. You're not gonna survive. It's
like
gonna take you so
Melania,
long. You're gonna
especially.
rage. Yeah, well, I'm not even talking about bosses specifically. I'm just talking about Dark Souls in general.
Honestly,
Anytime you're like, oh yeah, I want to play Dark Souls, just starting out, blah blah blah. First things everyone's gonna do is be like, oh dude, it's so difficult. Oh my gosh, you're gonna rage so hard. Oh my, you're gonna have such a tough time. It's so difficult.
then they overinflate the difficulty of things often.
Yeah,
Honestly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're gonna struggle at first, but once you get it, you get it.
Yeah, people will
It
give
becomes
you
a lot easier once you play for a little bit and you understand what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, and people will also give you facts that are not facts.
Mhm.
Or just just objectively wrong facts. Very often.
That person's perception has been poisoned because ideas are like a virus. It doesn't matter if that opinion is subjective or not. It has a real, tangible, objective influence.
Yeah.
Joseph Anderson said in his new
For
video
them,
that he has no
especially, yeah.
intention of having opinions used as objective truth that spreads to the masses. He makes a big thing of it in his intro, where he makes a straw man argument that people think he's Satan for trying to sow his objective opinion. Obviously, I know it's a joke, but he's put that there for a reason. It doesn't matter what his intention is. It doesn't matter if he has no intention of presenting his information as facts. People will adopt his opinion as their own. He will change the perception of how some people think. Intention is irrelevant. When you state your opinions on the internet, Some people are going to be persuaded by you even when you're wrong.
Right.
You do need to be careful about what you say, but more importantly, how you say it. Because there is a real difference between saying something is undodgeable and the alternative of saying, I can't dodge it.
That's true. That is
Mm.
true. That is
Oh
true.
my god! Wow, that is the. Mm. I never thought about it that way, but that's perfect for how people view really anything.
Yeah, that's I I completely agree with that statement. Um, I was also thinking like when someone has such a big audience like Feeble King, Joseph Anderson, Matthew Matosis, when they have such big audiences, they they really do have an incredible influence, right? And they will shape the view of a game, right? Um,
It's like even Charlie, most critical, is guilty of this.
oh, for sure. I love him, man. I've been watching him for years and years. But like, look at Kingdom Hearts 3. He shits on that game all the time, even though he's never played any of the other Kingdom Hearts games.
Yeah, I still
And
don't understand that.
he played it one time and shits on it now. There are people that have never touched the series that will shit on it too.
Idiots.
Yeah. Things like that. It's just it's kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
But I do completely agree with again, please check out Gred Glintstone. He put together this video, and so far it's really, really, really well put together.
10 minutes in.
Yeah.
Less than 10 minutes in.
I also real quick wanted to mention like for example, another good example is a really good example is Asmongold. He has a giant influence, and he is also very what's the right word? People struggle to determine when he's fucking around or not.
He doesn't. He uses the same tone for everything, so he
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yep. So people will sometimes think he's serious when he's not, and vice versa. But again, he carries even more weight than they do, the people in this video, you know. But let's keep going.
Critics have a lot of influence, and for this reason, they do need to be held accountable. I'm sorry to put that level of pressure on these creators, but they have a significant platform. Even Feeble, who has far less subscribers than Joseph, still gets a ton of views. Their words have influence in the community. These ideas create culture, and culture informs perception, whether they want that or not. That clip earlier is from a video called Subjectivity is Implied, where Joseph takes issue with people trying to pick apart his arguments when they're like, just his opinion, man. Newsflash, if someone tells you that you have a skill issue, even if you find that offensive, the subjectivity is still implied. It goes both ways. I don't understand this hand-wringing from internet critics that feel like they're above criticism. If you feel like there is a problem with the design because you can't figure something out, people are allowed to give you their subjective opinion that you are wrong. I don't like the skill issue get good discourse either. I've talked about it before because I feel like it misses the point, but people are allowed to have that subjective opinion. It's not hate speech. It's not abusive. It's just a little annoying. But that's just the territory of being on the internet. Some people are going to say things that rub you the wrong way. But why is it that Joseph Anderson feels that he can say this?
But these toxic assholes that have latched onto this series, probably because it's the first time in their life that something held them accountable, so now they view a game dev as a surrogate parent, need to stop being a dominant voice in all of these conversations.
When someone tells him that he has a skill issue, this is not comparable to saying get good. This is not on the same level. This is not an appropriate reaction. This is malicious. This is toxic. He is lashing out at people for telling him that he is bad at the game. This is classic gamer rage. More to the point, subjectivity does not excuse you.
Wait, okay. Okay, I mean like when
Just the
you
word gamer rage.
yeah, no. That's kind of funny. I mean, what do you think about that?
He, so far, he's put into words everything that I feel about. Like, I've never been able to fully put into words how I feel
Yeah.
about people like explaining games and stuff, especially like Soul fans.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I
So
agree.
it's just nice. It's nice to hear what I've been thinking.
I agree. I don't completely like I don't think it's like get good and all that shit. I don't it is really fucking
I don't
annoying,
care about that.
right?
I don't care about that though.
Yeah, no, I know, but
I care
like
about the glaze
yeah,
that
yeah.
people give, thinking that everything that Miyazaki creates is the most perfect game in all of existence.
Yeah, I mean like for like what he brought up right there with the with like how Joseph responded to that, how he did, and
Mm-hmm.
like while I do kind of like understand because that shit annoys me too. Like saying get good isn't like criticism. It's nothing helpful, but responding to it in the way that Joseph did when he has such a large audience is not good. Right? Like that's what I really
Mm-hmm.
agree with. I
That's another thing I don't like is people weaponizing their influence,
mhm.
especially for something like video games.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Being wrong. If I tell you that Elden Ring is a racing game developed by Olive Garden and the first video game to feature a playable character that is a human man, is that subjective or is that just me stating an incorrect fact? If I tell you Denmark is the capital of Malaysia, that
Bro,
is
we
not
gotta
a
go to
subjective
Malaysia.
opinion. That is an incorrect fact. If I want to imply
Gotta go see
subjectivity,
Denmark,
then I can
bro.
say, in my opinion, Denmark is the capital of Malaysia.
Bro,
But even
Denmark is
if
my
I
favorite
implied
country in
subjectivity,
Asia.
I'm giving you my subjective opinion on a fact, which is useless. It is not interpretive. Art is, of course, subjective, but if I tell you the lead actor of Oppenheimer is SpongeBob SquarePants, that is not a
I gotta go
subjective
see that.
opinion. There is nothing to interpret in that statement. Even if I was implying subjectivity, it is still a fact that is wrong. Joseph states in his video that even words like jump and run are subjective, and yes, there is subjectivity in perception. That is a weird rabbit hole, but we don't have to stretch that concept far before it becomes completely.
I guess because your perception of running and jumping could be different from other people. I guess
So he's
that's
some,
weird.
mm,
Cause like
some
some
weird ass semantics to fucking just like basically just something to try and prove his point.
yeah, like I'm guessing like oh
Which
some
yeah, I mean he's technically right, but it just
it's like a paradox.
it's to prove his point. I mean, yeah, he's right, but like it's stupid at the same time. Like he might as well just be saying, well, uh, the sky's purple because I feel like it looks purple. You know,
Yeah,
I,
what's the the argument like with the sky, right? What is it? Like it's the sky isn't blue or whatever the fuck. What is it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know, dude. No.
Yeah, it's something like the sky isn't blue, the hue, it's like the hue. I forget what it is. I've heard it a bunch or I used to. Yeah, it's like the hue is actually orange or some shit. I don't know.
Untenable in this context. If I tell you that my hair is red, it could
Oh.
be that my perception of color is different to yours, or that we have different definitions of red and hair, but it would be unfair of me to intend that statement as subjective opinion and not a descriptive fact, especially if you don't know what I look like. If I wanted to communicate subjectivity, I would need to imply subjectivity. Otherwise, there would be no way for you to know.
This is below 20 frames of animation from start to damage, and that's my criteria for something being unreactable.
If Joseph tells you that Godric's Storm Assault move is less than 20 frames, that's not subjective.
That's so
not an
much
opinion.
time to-
And it's not subjective for me to tell you he is wrong about those frames. Count them. Joseph has either not actually checked the frames, or he has lied to strengthen his point. Either way, there's no integrity in this statement. Subjectivity is not implied here, and even if it was, it's not an opinion. It's an incorrect fact. I know Joseph acknowledges there were mistakes in the last video, but I haven't seen anyone pick up on this. He hasn't corrected it, and it's a big one. It's not a misinterpretation. It's not an opinion. It's not a skill issue. He's giving a firm number that is wrong. People King repeats these sentiments in his recent video, and who man. In Feeble's video, a critique of Joseph Anderson, an admitted influence on Feeble King, and one of the reasons he got into this business in the first place, a person who he directly speaks.
Real quick, have you seen Feeble King? Like, have you listened to a Feeble King video?
No.
Okay.
I haven't even seen this video, which I kind of want to watch that video just to see
All right.
what he says.
Yeah, maybe we could do that sometime. But I've watched like all of Feeble King's videos, because like I've been subbed to him for a pretty long while, right? He is probably one of the most controversial Souls tubers I've ever seen. He also sounds like Chills. You'll hear it, and I'm pointing it out right now. He has that
Jimmy,
drawl.
Promise Consort, Redon was a really, really, really bad boss.
Speaks to in this
all he
video,
did was
in this response video, where he critiques
all I can
Joseph
imagine.
using his own style of
You'll hear
critique
it.
that he stole, and if that isn't the
Why is
snake
Bro
eating its
Level
own
wanting
tail,
this
I
shit
don't
right
know
now?
what is. In this video, he straight up plagiarizes Joseph Anderson. This section here, subjectivity is implied. It's straight up ripped off.
Some people might ask that I put "in my opinion" over all my videos.
There are a growing number of people who, in my experience, are demanding that every sentence in every video include a "I think that" or "in my opinion."
I think people forget this when I speed up the pacing and drama of my video by not saying "in my opinion" every 3 sentences.
You
In
hear
my
it?
opinion, this would lead to unnecessary clutter when writing and recording scripts for videos.
But in my opinion, subjectivity is implied.
In the description, Feeble puts the videos that he sourced. This one isn't mentioned at all. He doesn't say these aren't his words. This is straight up unchecked plagiarism. It is unreal. Anyway, he says the same thing, exact same thing. Subjectivity is
favorite boss.
implied. And while scrolling through the comment section of this video, I find this comment from a big creator in the community,
Okay.
Smoky. And he sides with
Okay, sorry you've had that experience with the community, bud. I love your channel, even though I am a certified FromSoft glazer. I think your opinions are always very well articulated and enjoyable to listen
my
to.
God. Oh my god, a glazer who's not an idiot? Oh. I mean, I don't know if that's a way to put it, but at least he's like,
No, dude's 100% honest, and
yeah.
with yeah.
Feeble and sympathizes with him, receiving negative criticism. He says that
Alright. Okay, agreed, mate. As you can say, people can just disagree and move on. We all want different things. We all experience it in different ways. No game should be immune from feedback, and you shouldn't be attacked for offering up constructive criticism, which is more or less the point Joe ended his video on as well. People acting like criticism is a personal attack rather than a part of a healthy environment. I'm sorry, why are criticisms immune to criticism? Okay.
that no one should be attacked for giving constructive criticism. He relates this sentiment to Joe's video. You know, the one where he calls Souls fans ignorant children with daddy issues for telling him that he's bad at the game. The one where he spends a third of the video attacking his audience for criticizing him instead of actually talking about the game he's critiquing. So what are these attacks that Smotown is referencing? Feeble says
I'm-
people are
I
nitpicking.
think I've listened to that video before, but I'm actually not 100% sure if he shows it in this video at some point, right? That what he just said is actually factual, then I'll be like, damn, that's kind of crazy. But since I'm not even sure if I've 100% watched that Joseph Anderson video or listened to it. So I can't necessarily like be like, yeah, he's being real. Like he did spend that amount of time doing that. You know what I mean?
Picking him and saying that his arguments are in bad faith. We're going to interrogate that later, but I'll start by saying the subjectivity is implied in those statements too. Internet critics have forgotten a very important unwritten law in having strong opinions online, and that is the doctrine of don't give what you can't take. Because the stuff
True.
Feeble says in his videos is far more inflammatory than any of the things that I've seen
Wait,
in
what?
his
I'd rather get in more damage than using that opening to heal.
Okay, that's pretty stupid.
Yeah, what?
comment section. In my video, a pretty tame video
Keep playing, I'll
about
be right back.
managing anger and finding more holistic ways to deal with frustration, someone posted this comment. Hilarious, I'm getting it framed.
Probably
Sorry to all the
the
queer
kid.
creators
What the fuck? Wait, what?
on the platform. A straight dude making a video about gamer rage has taken the crown. This is the territory of being online. Where have you been? People can disagree with you sometimes. There's hostility. Sometimes it's mean.
Dude, you missed it.
Someone posted this comment. Hilarious, I'm getting framed. Sorry to all the queer creators on the platform. A straight dude making a video about gamer rage has taken the crown. This is the
Dude,
territory of
my man Billy S is gonna be livid.
being online. Where have you been? People can disagree with you sometimes. There's hostility. Sometimes it's mean. But Feeble isn't talking about hate comments.
Wait, the healing point doesn't make sense. You are supposed to heal during the punish windows, not run away for 3 seconds and waste your healing window. I thought you knew how the game worked based on your last boss video. Well, here's the thing. That's kind of weird, because this guy has beaten all the games. He's done level 1 videos and shit. I'm pretty sure. So, that's confusing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He's
I
talking
think
about people disagree.
Yeah.
I think part of this is we didn't see the other videos, so we don't really know what they're going about right now.
Well, I have seen, like I said, I have seen Feeble King's videos, and so I do admittedly believe this stuff when they're talking about Feeble King, at least. But it's just like it's just confusing, because they're better at the game than I am, you know, and I know this stuff, so that's what's confusing. So am I like deglazing myself, or are they just making a fake point? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, like, why would somebody like him say this?
Exactly.
Agreeing with him in a pretty ordinary way. Feeble calls the Souls community the most toxic community on the internet. Something
True.
that he, again, almost repeats word for word from Joseph's video.
Hands down, no contest, FromSoft has the worst community.
FromSoft player base has become the absolute worst fan group in video games.
The example he gives for this incredibly toxic
in video
community-
games. The only other one, the only one that I really think can top it is Genshin. Offhand.
Toxic community.
I think Genshin is worse. I really do. I do genuinely think Genshin is worse. For sure. But like, that's coming from someone who has been playing that game since day one, right? And it's like, you don't even need to be playing the game to see what Twitter is like with that game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you've seen it before, or like
I've just heard it from
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it can be bad, but you know, I don't know. I always try not to like let things like that ruin things for me, and also these are all just from a singular person's perspective, so I don't know. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's for someone insulting him for saying the reward for defeating the putrescent knight is a cookbook.
Never have I been insulted by someone who disagrees with me for leaving out information that supports my case.
This is the insult he's complaining about. That's not an insult.
What?
That's a subjective opinion. It's not abusive. It's not toxic. He's just calling Feeble out for a bad take, which is justified because it is a bad take. It is hilariously wrong and intentionally misleading.
Another time I was taken aback by the game's laziness was when I completed the Stone Coffin Fissure Legacy dungeon and beat Putrescent Knight, only to be rewarded with a cookbook. They couldn't even have the decency to reward me with a single Shadow Tree fragment.
It doesn't matter.
First of all, you see how I say he's like Chills?
Yeah.
How he has that long, like
really weird, oddly monotone voice.
Yeah. But also, well,
much Feeble values the Centrina questline or the rewards they give, it is an objectively incorrect statement to say that the cookbook is the reward. There is no implication of subjectivity there. It doesn't matter if he didn't think they were good rewards, they were still rewards. He didn't think the cookbook was a good reward either. He said cookbook instead of the other things because it was funnier for the video. He was doing a bit which is intentionally misleading. What a greedy grifter goblin.
mm-hmm.
And while we're on this, for a guy that loves analyzing his favorite art, FromSoft games included, how are you not talking about Centrina?
Right.
Let's pause for a second and actually critique the game. Look at this. This might be my favorite character design in FromSoft history.
Me too, literally.
Me OST.
Too. Next to Maria.
My God. Not everything is about reward. Sometimes it's,
she's so
it's about the art.
The art itself
doesn't mention any of this. It's always.
Ironically, this is what I'm picturing when I think of Silent Hill F.
Mm-hmm.
Since that's like fresh in my mind. A little bit off topic, but the Silent Hill transmission, they mentioned that the game's theme is horror within beauty. I mean, look at that, right?
The same concepts.
Yeah.
Body horror, but it's so beautiful at the same time.
Exactly.
Look at it.
And
Saint Collier was so obsessed with her.
And I mean, I've told you before that like Saint Trina, I think I've said this to you, like Saint Trina is like my favorite part of the game. Like my favorite character in Elden Ring is Saint Trina.
Yeah, I agree.
It makes fighting the Putrescent Knight worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't like that boss personally.
Yeah, it's a boss of all time.
It truly is. But
it is a boss that exists.
Like, to say that the only reward is a cookbook really is just like kind of wild. But I don't know. Let's see.
It's about what he can get out of it. If it doesn't make him stronger, then it doesn't care. How boring. What a shallow interpretation of this whole sequence. I keep hearing critics talk about this whole area and the finger ruins like, wow, there's nothing here. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but when I got here, I wasn't thinking about how empty it was. I was thinking, what the fuck is up with all these fingers? This blew my mind.
I was thinking,
holy shit.
I was thinking, how the hell do I get out of here? How do I get that thing to get out of here? You know, like, I wasn't worried about how empty it was. I'm thinking, this place is terrifying.
Yeah, I was like, I thought the same thing he did. I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. But I will say, shortly after that, I was immediately hit by those fucking worm guys, and then I hated my time there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that the only thing you can get there is that one item. Or I think there might be another thing. I think there is another thing you can.
Well, there's the item, and then there's an item and the horn.
Right. But
there is basically nothing.
Yeah.
To criticize the entire area for that whenever it clearly serves a different purpose is stupid.
Yeah. let's hear him out a little bit before I continue.
Why do we only want to talk about the rewards? These blue flower fields
This
are so
area,
pretty.
yeah.
Shaman Village, oh man, what a cool discovery. It's so beautiful. Bonnie Village, the jar people in the dungeons? Why is it that when I hear people complaining about the exploration in Elden Ring, it's always because they didn't get anything cool out of it? This is cool, isn't it? We don't like this? Charo's hidden.
Okay.
I love how her head is on the middle of her body.
I know, right? That is really sick. I love it. Okay, honestly, about this point, I completely agree. Like as a person subjectively, some of my favorite parts in this game, honestly, my
The
favorite
environment.
parts in Elden Ring's DLC were these areas and these designs when I'm thinking back.
The environments.
Like he just said, the blue flowers, that is my favorite area in the entire game. Just because.
It's why I like Caelid so much. The story it tells just by existing.
Yeah. Yep. That's why over time I like low key like have grown to like Caelid more and more as time goes on. um I don't know, man. Like it really is pretty. A lot of the DLC areas are just so stunning artistically.
Mm-hmm.
But my counterpoint to this is he is correct, but he also like not everyone gives a shit about this stuff.
You do have to find a balance. You can't make it too empty, especially for those who are just looking for stuff. They're like, okay, why am I here? What do I need to do?
Yeah, like not everyone gives a shit about art. Like for example, like Sea Dog VA when he played the game, I don't think he ever thought about that. Man was like, "Okay, I'm playing the game. I'm playing to fight the bosses. I'm going through." Or like, Jay. Jay doesn't give a shit about art. He wants to fight the bosses.
Yeah, it's really what he is.
Yeah, exactly. Like people play these games for different reasons. And I will appreciate the art like he is saying. I find it cool. I find it incredible actually. But I'm a person who loves world design, right? That's why I like writing. But again, not everyone will feel that way. So I don't know. I don't know about that.
Grave, though, I'll give you that. We didn't even meet Charo. Who the fuck is Charo? Anyway,
Who
back
is
to the topic at
Charo?
hand. Feeble is on the internet saying some really inflammatory things about games that people, including him, care very strongly about. Which of these comments is more toxic?
What do you think?
That levels critical.
Not gonna lie.
It's kind of funny.
That is kind of funny. That is like something you would say.
Right. Yeah. In the context, it doesn't make it right. Without saying that to you, that would be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Because like we're friends, right? Like we have history, connection, all that shit. These guys don't know each other.
You'll say that to somebody on the internet just because they piss you off.
Yeah. That's equivalent of this guy, of the commenter being like, this guy cannot believe this guy just said Shadow of the Erd Tree is somehow worse than Frigid Outskirts because it has 2 Death Knights.
Mm-hmm.
And then like that's just really funny. I don't even know what my point was being. Like my point right there was I just saying it out loud just makes it funnier to me, I think.
Brain rot level's critical.
My brain rot level is critical. I was gonna make a point, and then I just quoted the fucking comment. I completely forgot my point because that's how funny I find this.
He's stupid. It's funny in a like what the fuck kind of way, but it's not funny because of the context.
So real
it's
quick.
It's funny that he decided to say this.
Real quick, do you know what
And
frigid
he thought
outskirts
that was a good
is?
idea. No.
Frigid outskirts are commonly referred to as like the worst area in like FromSoft like Souls stuff. Frigid outskirts, they basically, it's like a 5-minute run back to a double boss fight of a repeated boss / boss is.
So it's like if they had made a 5-minute run back to let's see, another Crucible night.
Yeah, basically. Also, I don't know if it's actually 5 minutes, but it is.
It's unnecessarily long.
But it's also with enemies that are awful. Like nobody likes this area.
The point is that it's unnecessarily long.
Yes, and also make it CS in Elden Ring, also with the blizzard. So it's that too. So yeah, it's pretty bad.
That's disgusting.
Right.
Why is he so butthurt about comments that aren't half as bad as his own? In this 1-hour video, which was intended to be a response to Joseph Anderson's critique, Feeble spends 12 minutes.
So he talks about the open world, Dark Souls depression, level design, my issue with bosses, what makes a boss truly great, Miyazaki like... What? Oh yeah, he likes it hard. The fatal flaw of Elden Ring boss design for me. I glazed Joe for over a minute straight like a jelly-filled donut. JoJo's bizarre critique. Get it? Money-hungry grifter goblin. Hello?
What is this? What are these timestamps?
I guess Feeble King's timestamps for what happens in the video.
Yeah, no, but I'm just like, what are they?
Like the names? Yeah, I know.
Sounds like a 13-year-old made these.
Damn.
Talking about Joseph Anderson. 2 of those minutes are, in his own words,
I can't like
glazing
deny
him.
that.
He spends the other 50 minutes
Holy
complaining
shit.
about the mean comments that he got in his last video. The only reason that I can think that he included Joseph Anderson at all instead of separating these videos is that he wants Anderson to see how mean people are being to him. He's telling on his audience. He's saying, see, they're being mean to me too. He doesn't respond to Joseph's thoughts about the DLC itself at all, which is so bizarre because Joe loved it and Feeble hated it.
Yeah.
I think. He doesn't defend his opinions of why the DLC is bad. He seems embarrassed by that. Instead, he argues against one safe minor point that Joseph makes in order to praise the base
peak fight.
game.
Love
Then
that
he
fight.
makes a Witcher 3 joke and goes right
Oh,
back
what
to
fight?
talking about the mean
Rolana?
comments. It is blatantly
Oh, yeah,
sycophantic.
okay.
This isn't a response to his critique.
Get off fucking Family Guy, bro.
Oh, damn. Holding clothes, shit.
Okay. Hey, bro, can you come and fold mine?
No.
I'm kidding. I'm the house. Okay, I'm good. Real quick, not gonna lie, pal. I like folding clothes.
At all.
It's not that I don't like them.
I know. I'm just weird like that. I'm a fucking housewife at heart.
This is helping me do it. True. This is helping me do it because we're.
Right. To say that the only reward for being yep.
Back to this.
Cannot handle criticism. Joseph Anderson cannot
I want to see
handle
all of his
criticism,
replies.
but they are two of the harshest
What was that?
critics on YouTube.
I want to see all of
But
these
what
replies.
really boiled my blood
Like how
is in
each of these
Joseph's
comments
new
he's shown
review,
have had
where he
replies.
talked about toxic
We should
positivity. And this
go to that
idea has
video
been blowing
after the video.
up over the last few years, glazing, simping,
I have to see where this
cult-like
goes first.
fanaticism.
Yeah.
This idea that you are toxic for not focusing.
To clarify, I do not think that people who disagree with me or like the DLC are in a cult. I just think that the way some FromSoft fans argue is cult-like. If I dislike the action combat of...
Okay. That first two sentences are actually very valid.
I can see why he would think that, to be honest. I can.
It's a bit of an aggressive way to put it, but
yeah.
The idea is right.
It's the concept of people falling into I forget I think it's a theory, but it's basically like a hive mind. Yeah, exactly. If I dislike the action combat of the Shadow of the Erdtree bosses, and the fan base tells me it's my fault for disliking something because I didn't use summons, I find that to be cult-like.
Okay, so okay. Ooh,
What?
he's an idiot.
Yeah, in this case, yeah.
In this case, he's an idiot. Never mind. I rescind my statement. He's saying the right things for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. It's an argument made under the assumption that the game is inherently enjoyable and that all negatives someone might find is enjoyable and that all negatives someone might have is their own fault, and that if I had used summons or a meta build, I would enjoy the game. Maybe someone made that argument, but that's not what argument I would have to that. My argument would be like, you're making it more difficult on yourself, pal.
Yeah,
Make it easier.
If you're going to complain about difficulty or how it's designed, whatever, the game is designed for you to use summons.
Yeah.
But it can be done either way. But if you're going to complain about the game design and you're not playing the way the game intended, you're an idiot.
The game.
It's like if you. It's like if your first playthrough of Dishonored, you decided to not use any powers or anything, which is meant to be a challenge later on.
Right.
And you got pissed that the game was too difficult or that why can't I do this or that because I don't have my powers because you decided to not do them?
Even better. If you tried to do what I did and did a no-kill run of every level on your first playthrough, and you realized you could not use most of the powers because they kill people. Right? Like, and then you got pissed at the game because of that. Honestly,
if this was you saying this stuff, I would call you stupid.
Yeah. I just, it's kind of odd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're supposed to have the freedom in Elden Ring. That's the whole point of the game. You have the freedom. You have so many tools at your disposal to make the game a goddamn cakewalk.
Mm-hmm.
You saw what I did. I beat Promised Consort Radahn in fucking 4 tries.
Because you were using an arguably...
I used a busted build. I used a really good build that I made myself. Like, it's just... The game is what you make it. And I slightly understand where he's like, oh yeah, you're not summoning, you should be able to do it without summoning and enjoy it without summoning. I'm like, well, yeah, and some people can do that, right? But if you as a person are not having fun, just summon.
Yeah, exactly.
You can still see the faults, like the fault in bosses, by summoning. You can or you can still have problems with a boss by summoning. But you have to go in like full depth if you're gonna say something is objectively bad. That's the problem, right?
Yeah, it's it's just the main criticism me and you have of Souls fans. Where it's
Right.
like, oh, if you're not using summons, then that's the only way to play. But if you're using summons, you're playing wrong. It's like, no, the game was designed for summons.
Yeah,
That's why they gave you so many summons.
the game is clearly designed to give the player all the tools they can use. And people shouldn't like trash on people for using the tools that they're given.
Mm-hmm.
People can play the way they want to be, the way they want to play, basically. Either way, it doesn't matter too much. I'm just leaving this comment because I think people have misunderstood me to a certain extent. I don't believe in objective criticism about art, and if you want Shadow of the Erdtree's design to be the future of FromSoft, it's fine to disagree and dislike the video. I will sit on the sidelines and be sad as a series I used to love turns into something I no longer enjoy, and more games like this will be in From's future. Huh. Okay, let's continue. I don't have much to say about that other than huh.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Keep playing it.
Okay.
Focusing solely on the flaws of the game. That's an interesting cultural shift, and I believe it has everything to do with the interaction the audience has now with the artist, and the role the critic plays in fanning that flame. So let's get into it. Critique and criticism are really weird words because no one can really agree on them. Critique comes from the French word for judge, and in French, the word has two meanings. The first meaning is the one which is concerned with the critical analysis of art and ideas. The second is the act of negatively criticizing something. In order to differentiate the two, in English, we formed a new word to denote the negative meaning, that being criticism. The difficulty is that we now use criticism when we mean critique because we don't want to sound pretentious in French. We have art criticism, literary criticism, game criticism, but also just plain regular criticism, which is a very different thing. To make things even more complicated, we also have people who say critique but mean criticism because they want to tear you apart but sound fancy while they do it. To simplify, for this video, I will define my terms by way of Merriam-Webster. Criticism is most often used...
Criticism and critique. There's some overlap in meaning, but they're not the same in every situation. Criticism is most often used broadly to refer to the act of negatively criticizing someone or something. Okay. I'm more interested in encouragement right now than criticism. Yeah. Or remark or comment that expresses disapproval. She shared a minor criticism about the design, while critique is a more formal word for a carefully expressed judgment, opinion, or evaluation of both the good and bad qualities of something. For example, books or movies. Thus, a critic can write a critique that may be full of criticism.
A critique is more so an analysis with research.
Well,
and
a criticism
is
it's more
it's just a
inherently
surface
negative.
level. Yeah, and it shouldn't be, but it's more of a surface level. Oh, this is wrong, or you need to do this.
Yeah, and also criticisms can be very different depending on how a person delivers them and how the person getting them receives them. If
Criticism
should not
be inherently negative,
but often it is.
Because of how we are as humans.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's again like it's how some people may frame a criticism that can come off wrong.
Broadly, to refer to the act of negatively criticizing someone or something, while critique is a more formal word for a carefully expressed judgment, opinion, or evaluation of both the good and bad qualities of something. So a critic writes critiques, and I may criticize you for being late to work. A critic can have a critique that is full of criticism, but the critic's primary role is not to criticize. It is to give a carefully expressed judgment, opinion, or evaluation of both the good and bad qualities of something. An important part of critique is the process of weighing up a work of art to determine its value. It does still come from the root word judge, after all. We want to know if we should invest our money or time into it. But great critique is about more than telling you what to think. It's telling you how to think. And slow down, I'm not implying that you don't know how to think. It's a matter of articulation. It's critical thinking, critical analysis, and that can be difficult. If you walk out of a movie and I ask you what you thought, you might have 100 things you want to tell me about how you felt, or you might say, I liked it, but struggle to tell me why. Because we often don't know why we respond emotionally to things. That's why critics are helpful. They allow for an informed perspective that is built on a foundation of opinion, yes, but also knowledge. And those two things come together to form a meaningful interpretation. Keyword here is meaningful. There's magic to finding something that you love or hate and hearing a perspective that gives you a new depth of meaning for those emotions. That's a good critique.
That's how I feel when I
First
play
and foremost,
Xenoblade.
critique is for the reader, or in the case of video games, it is for the player. It is to inform the player's experience and give new meaning to the emotions felt on that journey. If you felt like you loved a game, but you're not sure why you enjoyed it, a critic with a similar experience can shed new light on your emotions and maybe even help you develop your taste so that you can go and enjoy other works of art that allow for similar experiences.
Yeah, that's basically how I feel about, but in the opposite direction, Tears of the Kingdom. The more videos I watched on it, the more I realized how, like, why I felt the way I did about that game, you know?
Yeah.
Really help to narrow down what you like or don't like so you can form stronger opinions. Or, if you hated something, you can revel in someone else's distaste for it and find new reasons to hate it. That can be really cathartic. It's like
Me and
talking with a
you
friend
hating
about
the
how
Shadow
much
of the Orchard.
so-and-so at school or work annoyed you. You feel justified that someone else feels the same way that you do, and you connect. You
Metaphor. I honestly I have been warming up to Metaphor. The late game has been pretty good, but not the point. I do think it's very correct though. Like, and while I can't say I absolutely hate Shadow of the Erd Tree. I'm definitely like, I mean, you know me. I love Bloodborne.
I don't.
The old
I
Hunters
mean,
is peak, and I'm not the biggest fan of Shadow of the Erd Tree, but I can't say I hate it
Yeah.
either.
And we have what's it called coming up soon? That'll probably blow the Shadow of the Earth Tree out.
Lies of P Overture.
Overture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like me and you are we're already pretty confident.
Yep. I'm locked in already.
bond over shared experiences. It's a beautiful thing. And you can also learn more about the significance of the work and understand the history that allowed it to be. But critique isn't just about shared experiences. You don't need to agree, and meaning can come from the interrogation of ideas from a different perspective. It can allow you to look at a game in a new light, and that might strengthen your perspective or potentially persuade you to take a different position. Either way, there is a real value in seeing art through another person's experience, even when it differs starkly from your own. And that is the purpose of critique. That is the role of the critic. Joseph Anderson came onto the scene 9 years ago with a series of videos about Dark Souls. He calls this a critique. I'm very confident that he decided to do that because of this Matthew Matos's Dark Souls 2 critique that came out a year earlier. I'm confident in saying that because Joseph Anderson himself has said that he's influenced by Matthew Matosis, at one point saying that he is Matthew Matos's little brother, which is a very cute way of saying, I ripped him off. Matthew Matosis is to Joseph Anderson what Joseph Anderson is to Feeble King. It's a lineage. And it all starts with this one video. In this video, Matthew roasts this game, which he hated and was really disappointed by. Well, that's not completely true. He does say that it was good and better than most games on the market, but he's clearly not happy with it. Joseph takes this style for his series, but the difference is that Joseph wasn't disappointed with Dark Souls. He considers it a masterpiece. It's in his top 5 games of all time, one of the best experiences he's ever had with a video game. But in this series, which is 5 videos long and totaling almost 2 hours, he mercilessly roasts it, just like Matthew did in his Dark Souls 2 video. And he does this in the name of constructive criticism. Now, before we go down that road, let's define constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is a feedback method that offers specific actionable recommendations for change and improvement. Let's take a look at how Joseph Anderson gives constructive criticism. Here's him talking about the story of Dark Souls.
All right.
Vati, cover your ears.
It's an imaginative, grim setting that I enjoy but have no illusions of there being any substance to it. I know that some people enjoy filling in the blanks for themselves, but I can't get into that. I need there to be some solid foundation, some truth that the whole game is based on, that I really don't think exists, not even in the mind of the game's creators. It's purposefully vague because vague is what From wanted. The fog doors in the game can sometimes get your imagination going in preparation for what's on the other side. Sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's the next level in an area. In the case of the story, I think it's better if you never try to step through. There's nothing waiting for you on the other side.
Ooh. I mean,
Ooh.
imagine if someone at Kotaku said that, there'd be a lynching.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know me. I don't like having to piece together a story just through lore. I don't like it. But to say that there's nothing there is kind of insane.
It's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just not easy to find, which is our problem.
Yeah, and I do agree. I personally feel like if you need to watch Vati Vidya to get the fucking story out of a game, because let's be real, let's be honest with ourselves. I don't believe most people read the lore. I believe people will watch YouTube videos on them. That's what I would do. That's what most people I know would do. I think that's what everyone I know would do, actually. I don't think
the only reason I know anything about it.
Yeah, is YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, no. But, that being said, there are people like Vadi who will do that. I haven't met them personally. That doesn't mean they don't exist, right?
Some people enjoy that, but it's not for me.
Yeah, right. It's not for most people, but people like that way of storytelling. I don't. I really don't. I think it's fucking lame in a lot of ways, personally. But that's because that's not how I prefer to consume a story. Some people just want to play a game. Some people like playing a game and like piecing together things in the game without any story, and that's what some people like about these games. It's not my thing, but to say
the balance is Resident Evil.
that's a good balance for you.
You get a lot of lore through just playing the game.
But there's story with it. Yeah.
Well, this fucking Birkin made the G virus, and now everyone's gonna die. But then you're reading all the extra war pieces of paper, and it's like, well, why did he make it? Was he his umbrella doing this? Blah blah blah, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Or anything involving the village in RE4.
Village. Or RE4, yeah.
Now, pal, you gotta play Village first.
You know what I mean, though.
It's really the same, though. You are right. Like, it's always nicely done. Even in especially in RE1, actually, you piecing together things in the mansion through notes. It's cool. It's great. Like, yeah, exactly. I wish there was more, personally. I wish there was like a more tangible story for me to grasp onto. That's how I like my stories told. But yeah, it's just a bit like disingenuous to say what Joseph said there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can. It's just kind of quiet.
I'm really far away from my mic.
The utter disrespect. I don't care if you're a lore guy, that's such a shitty thing to say about the developers of one of your favorite games. Joseph Anderson is a self-published author that writes
I
fantasy
didn't know that.
sci-fi novels. I bet you if anyone said anything like that about him and his work, he would be absolutely crushed. And he loves this game. He's passionate about it to spend this much time talking about it. Why is he this hostile? I know Joseph Anderson is a bit embarrassed by these videos, so I won't speak too much on them, but he's got some really wild takes in this one. In his new video, he says that he loves everything up until after Ornstein and Smo, but he hates Ornstein and Smo here.
I've read Ornstein and Smo described as a dance between the bosses and the player. It can certainly feel that way sometimes with constant movement and ducking and dodging around the pillars. The key difference is that you're never an active participant in this dance. I never die to this boss anymore. I also never have a fun time either.
He doesn't even like Anor fucking Londo.
And
Really?
Londo is one of the worst wastes of potential in the entire game.
Whoa.
He thinks the game doesn't correctly teach you about equipment load. He thinks you should start naked so the game can teach you to put on clothes. It's so bizarre.
Huh?
But more than anything, he makes frequent complaints about the trial and error difficulty of the game, which he calls gotcha moments. He calls this indefensible and says that anyone who likes this design philosophy is guilty of having a victim complex. So yeah, Joseph making the claim that people who disagree with him are guilty of complex psychological problems is nothing new.
Holy
But
shit.
we'll come back around to the subject of trial and error later. Don't worry. But the point here is really that in this series of 5 videos, he is really, really nasty to this game that he loves. This is not constructive criticism. This is destructive criticism, which is when someone chews you out, mercilessly rips apart your idea, or publicly denigrates your abilities. It's not a critique. It's not constructive criticism. It's roast comedy. He is the angry video game nerd wearing the bloody skinned face of Matthew Matosis. He is
Holy
definitely
shit.
playing up the vitriol for these videos, often to the detriment of actual critique, and Joseph is aware of this. In his new video, he brings attention to it, but then soon falls into the same trap. In a video saying he really liked the DLC, he ends it by saying FromSoft need to get good, and I don't know how it can be toxic when people say that to Joseph Anderson, but totally fine when he says it
Did
to the
he
developers
actually?
of one of his favorite games. The issue with Joseph Anderson is that he's taking Matthew's style of criticism that was for a game he didn't like but wanted to love, and applies it to games he just loves. Matthew Matosis' video was fueled by gamer rage because he was really disappointed. Joseph is not. The style is inconsistent with how he feels. You notice Matthew only did 2 of these critique videos, but Joseph made it his whole thing. He ripped off his whole style from this one video. But the real problem with taking this style of video as the template for his career is that unlike critique, constructive criticism is not intended for the player. It is intended for the artist. And by taking this style, he is ignoring the relationship between critic and audience in favor of giving advice to the developer. But that is not critique, at least not in the way Joseph thinks it is. Matthew Matosis uses the fancy French meaning of critique, that being criticism. It's not critical analysis. Critics don't work for the artist, they work for the audience. Joseph sometimes does positive critiques, where he focuses less on the negatives and praises a game, but he still uses Matthew Matosis' fancy French definition of critique, meaning criticism, which points to a clear misunderstanding of the term that he's using. Notice Matthew here says that he ignores the positive in his Dark Souls 2 review because his intention is to critique. He means criticize.
What?
Joseph thinks he is doing critical analysis, but he's using a style that is focused on constructive or destructive criticism. These 2 things are antithetical. They are purposed differently. They are 2 different jobs. This is why Matthew Matosis separates the positive out of his critique. It's because that's not the job he's trying to do here, and although I don't agree with what he is trying to do here, unsolicited criticism in the art world is considered pretty rude. At least he's consistent with his definition. Usually critique of this kind would come from inside the development team, or hired externally by them. They do this during the making of the game so that the criticisms that they hear, they can actually implement. And if a critique, meaning criticism, came back this disrespectful and rude, this person would never work in the industry again. This is not the role of the critic. The critic doesn't come out of Oppenheimer and say, okay, Chris, I have some notes. That's not their job. Their job is to elicit understanding or appreciation for what they've just seen, not fix it. This is the problem with Joseph Anderson. And as Joseph postulates in his Subjectivity as Implied video, this has influence beyond the scope of his own words. They have a ripple effect, and countless copycats have popped up to ape his same style. Feeble is obviously one of them. He rips off his whole thing. Incredibly, after Joseph Anderson's video, one of Joe's biggest imitators, Democracy, posted a follow-up to his original Elden Ring video, apologizing for falling into this style of critique. And I think he should absolutely be applauded.
Taking a look at my video essay playlist, the last 5 videos are complaining about Shadow of the Erdtree, complaining about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, complaining about Cyberpunk 2077, complaining about Elden Ring. Are there aspects of these games to critique? Naturally. Nothing is perfect. But did I need to make it the one-sided emphasis on my commentary? Absolutely not.
He's become self-aware. He's really honest about how he fell into this trap of making this kind of content, and he takes ownership of it. He listened. That's really big of him. That's very different to Joseph Anderson saying sorry for pissing on your birthday cake while pissing on your birthday cake. I really hate this style of critique for 2 reasons. It is this strange hybrid of critique and constructive criticism where there is still an intention to conduct critical analysis and give a vague opinion of quality. Games are still stated as masterpieces, but the focus is actually on advocating for improvements. The overall opinion or interpretation of the work isn't important. What is important is the suggestion of change. It is entirely concerned with the negative and ignores the positive, and because of that, it can never be balanced or honest because it is not complete. There is no meaningful thesis that can be given about the significance of the work because the intention is not to facilitate appreciation or understanding. It is to improve, and that is not what critique is. But the second, and even more insidious reason that I hate this style of critique is that the criticism is not constructive. It is destructive. It relies on the showmanship of entertaining the audience through the denigration of the artist, and it is false. It is an affectation. It's not actually how these people feel because all these content creators list From Software games as some of their favorites. Matthew Matosis used this style to talk about 2.
Alternatively, they just say that, you know? You get what I mean? Like, they just say it's one of their favorites, but in reality, they're either A, not, like, accepting that it's not anymore, or B, they're just trying to, like, bring people in and be like, oh, yeah, I love this series. By the way, it fucking sucks.
2 video games that he was incredibly disappointed by. These critics use it for everything. These people love these games.
Pretty silly.
They're masterpieces. A good deal of these creators...
No, bro. That'd be like me being like, man, you know what I really love? One of my favorite series ever is BioShock. You see the problem there?
Yeah, he's never played BioShock.
But I love those games. Man, I really love God of War Ragnarok.
He's never played it.
Not true. I played like,
you know what I mean.
Maybe almost 2/4 of the game. Actually, I have no idea how far I got.
The point is that it's
yes.
Speak almost exclusively about these games. They're fanboys. They're Souls veterans, and they are the loudest, whiniest rage gamers in the community.
True.
Both Joseph Anderson and Feeble King call Souls fans the most toxic in the games industry, but they're referring to people who glaze and engage in toxic positivity. No, guys, this is the most toxic thing about the Souls community. This mentality of giving a review of a game they think is a masterpiece, but only talking about the negative aspects of it. Now, I'll be clear.
Real quick. I did see in the comments that I think it's Redditasker. I think that's how you pronounce that guy's name.
Yeah, Ratatosker.
Uh, he in the comments mentioned that he had that in the video, but he actually doesn't put Redditasker in, like, he doesn't think of Redditasker as a person actually involved in the video. So he apparently removed a section in the video talking about him or something
Yeah.
along
Let
those
me
lines.
see the comment real quick.
Uh, oh, what the fuck? Oh, it's big, so that's why
Mm, okay,
I think it's
Ratatosker. So
yeah.
he's another
Oh, it's right here.
YouTuber.
Yeah, yep. It's yeah. He's been cut from the intro. His thumbnails show up a couple times in the vid, but yeah, he's not equating them into the video.
Make no insinuations that this game is perfect or above criticism. In Joe's review, he mentions Bale's fire breath as being inexcusable, and I agree with him. I did a short on this channel a couple months ago. This should absolutely be fixed. It ruined the fight for me on my run, and it left a real bad taste in my mouth.
Whoa!
Mattia's
What
laser
the
is
fuck? Did you see that?
Yeah.
well, that move sucks. I really want that fight to be great because how cool is Mummy Fingers? What a rad design! It messes the whole
Dog.
thing up.
Mummy
It does.
Fingers.
Mummy
And I'm
fingers.
glad Radahn got nerfed. I think there were more options to deal with it than other more annoying moves in the game, but I think it allows for a lot more
I
variety.
still
of
haven't
playstyle
fought
now
him
that it's
since he got
fixed.
nerfed.
I also
Yeah, me
do
neither.
think
I
the
beat him
open
pretty
world
nerfed
creates a lot
Jack.
of problems for
Didn't
disparity
you
of
beat
player.
him? I really wanted to see you fight him and stuff. That was like 3 days before the nerf, wasn't it?
It was like two. It was two. It was 2 days before the nerf.
That's
It was
crazy.
either 2 or a day before. But you were like, yeah, dude, I really want you to.
I forget. Weren't you watching me when I fought him too?
We were in a call together.
But I don't think you were watching, were you?
No, I wasn't watching your stream. I think I was still getting to him. I was
That's
doing other
right.
stuff.
That's right,
I was
because he
doing
didn't want
other
to
stuff
see.
like DLC. Yeah.
The power. You can be much stronger than you should be at times or weaker than you should be at others. That happens in the other games too, but it's worse in Elden Ring because there's just so many other places you can go.
Agreed.
I do think that problem can absolutely be solved with a bit of self-management. I
Right.
talk about that in my last video, but it's definitely a lot to ask for in
I
a
will
first
say,
playthrough. I got all
Shadow the Archery has a really bad version of Kingdom Hearts' challenger system.
What do you mean?
Like the fact that everything has a scatter tree level essentially, like it has its own internal scatter tree level
Yeah.
that you're meant to be at basically to fight this, but the only way you can figure that out is through trial and error.
I
So
legit. I think it could have been fixed if they, instead of making a specific number where you can't have to find every single one of them on your first playthrough, they should have made them way more common. Maybe not way more common, but you know what I mean. Like enough to where you maybe realistically find enough to at least get one level before full, without needing to like go out searching for them for ages or look up a video on them. But like on your first playthrough, if you want to get maxed Shadow Tree blessings, you're gonna watch a video on it. There's no way you're gonna find them all because you need every
No.
single one to get max Shadow Tree blessing. It's kind of wild.
yeah, and
20
that's one of my biggest complaints is the Shadow Tree blessings are just really poorly done.
Yeah, it made you. I could tell when we were playing through it, it made you not want to play it.
Yes, that's the only thing stopping me from going back.
Yeah, it doesn't
Like,
really bug me. Like, well, going back, you won't need to get them. I'm pretty sure, unless you're
No,
doing a
like
new game
like
plus,
my
or
in
not
my
new
no,
game
in
plus.
my no summons.
Oh, yeah. I
I
mean,
want to play. I want to play them no summons because I want that challenge. Me personally, I like it. It's fun, but I don't want to get the fucking blessings again.
so I've been helping two friends play through it, right? and the both of them have done pretty well, but like it is really kind of, especially on your first playthrough, like having to lead them to get the Shadow Tree blessings is like, huh.
Oh, don't go there yet. You have to go here. Go get this. Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, like with one of them, she doesn't really like that. So I'll ask her like when she wants me to like tell her where some blessings are, or like when she wants pointers and where she can go, right? With the other, it's like I do that because I want to help him, and it's just like, yikes, man.
It's rough.
It can be, and yeah, some people may not even need them. Some people will do them, shirtless, fisticuffs, right? Whatever, but
Shirtless fisted while fisting.
yeah, exactly. But I don't know. It doesn't make it good. It does not. And if you have an issue with it, I think that's very valid, and I'm one of them. I don't think it's good. Like, I'm more mild on it than you are, but it's still just kind of
Yeah, I'd say it's the one thing keeping me from going. As a I don't like the DLC that much, of course, but I do enjoy. I really, really, the biggest thing is I just want to go face roll about something. It's like that's genuinely the one thing.
Luckily you can just move your ass over to go fight her.
Yeah, it's just, but the thing is, it's still like if I want to go back and play the DLC, to go and do that again. Blah, blah,
Yeah, that's fair.
Scatter tree fragments in my first run just because I
mean,
wanted to sniff them out. I
I'll
wanted to see
play the DLC
where
with
they
you.
were, and I kind of regret making myself that powerful. It made some fights an absolute stomp, which is not the experience that,
So it might be a while before that happens. So.
that I was looking for. But that being said, it's still my favorite game. I love it. And love isn't about ignoring something's faults. It's about loving it in spite of them. You can find problems in something and still celebrate it. You don't need to dwell on the part of the game that you hate. And saying that you love it doesn't mean that you don't think there are problems that could be fixed. But fixing it is not my job. I've said my piece about what I'd like changed, and then I move on. I don't need an hour to talk about that. I don't need a 5-episode series because there's just so much else that should be talked about. Why is it more important to talk about what a game does wrong than what a game does right? Who decided that? Even if we accept that this new style of critique is about giving advice to the artist, isn't it important to say what you liked so that they can make more of it? There is so much
like that. I agree. That's how I am with like Sonic Heroes and everything. And
Sonic mid.
that
silence was perfect.
Yeah. Cancel him, chat. Okay. This guy
is funny because I haven't played Heroes. I haven't played it.
You know what's funny, chat? You're what do they call it? What the devil did he say? Brain rot.
Okay.
What did he say? he said
brain rot. It's like brain rot levels critical. Brain rot levels critical.
Yeah. Brain rot levels critical. Let's keep going.
Beauty and wonder that comes from the open world. It really does create this wonderful tranquility. The other games don't give you this breathing space. It's so nice to have this little break to run across beautiful fields with this relaxing music before you go back to getting your head stomped into goo. This is an empty space to me. There's so much in it because of how it's making me feel. It's the contrast between this and this. And
Yeah,
even though the
music,
implementation of the open world creates
That's the one
some problems that the other games didn't have,
I do enjoy. That's the one thing I do enjoy heavily about the DLC is the music. It's
Honestly, I think that's where we differ. I've never liked the music too much in these games, like in any of them. It never stands out
so,
to me, you know?
so they I can understand it, but just the at least some of
Yeah, yeah. No, I
them.
understand that. I don't know. I've never been a fan of like ambient or ambiance in music for the most part. The only
The
time
most of the boss
I'm
music.
the only time I am is horror games.
Yeah.
Like
I was thinking more along the boss music.
oh okay. No, yeah, I was thinking about like the soundtrack in general, even with the
No, no, no,
boss
no,
music.
no, no. Boss music. Staying alone.
I
I
mean,
agree with you. I'm not big on like ambient tracks.
yeah, ambiance is not something I enjoy. I mean, like that's for a good example, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Hate it. I
Mm,
I sit there and I miss like the actual good music in the other Zelda games, and I'm like, where is that? That's just an
mm.
example, right?
It's an open world game thing.
Yeah, I just don't understand why. It doesn't need to be like that. um, I mean, what's a good example of that? Oh yeah, fucking Xenoblade. um, but I don't know. I will say, like Godskin Apostle, the Godskin Noble, like that soundtrack, it is obviously used a lot, but it's really good.
Mm.
um, and I do kind of meme on Ludwig's theme in Bloodborne because I do think it's a little bit overrated, but it's still really good when it picks up. You know, like the build up is really, really immaculate. uh, Lady Maria's theme is pretty good. Um,
Nah, he's just in love with her chat. Don't listen to him.
and if I am,
I'm just saying. I mean, just
yeah, chat. But
I
yeah,
never said something wrong with it. I just say,
hey man, listen man, Saint Trina though. All right,
it also has so much to give. But I never hear about what Elden Ring gives you, I only hear about what it doesn't give you. If you think it's a
that's
masterpiece,
true.
tell me about that. I've clicked on your video because I want to hear your critique, your whole critique, not a fraction of it. And if we disagree, that's fine, but I can't engage in a healthy debate with you. I can't join the discussion if you don't tell me how you feel, how you actually feel. If we accept Joseph Anderson's statement that his words and the words of others like him have a real objective influence on the perception of his audience, how do you think that affects how we engage and appreciate this art form? The reason I was compelled to make this video is because I think this style of critique has reached its proper jump the shark moment, its endgame. And that's because of Feeble's DLC follow-up, his response to Joseph Anderson. Feeble, in his original review, titled FromSoft's Worst DLC, where he calls the designers
want to say,
absurdly lazy, where he's sarcastic.
King K is the perfect example of like how to be really, really like good at making these types of videos.
mm-hmm.
King K is amazing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Shout out to him.
King Cake Glazer to the end.
Yeah, man, totally.
Says that he would only recommend it to people on a dare, where he says that he wishes it didn't exist. Feeble says this in his follow-up.
And to clear up another thing, worst DLC yet does not mean terrible.
Classic
What?
gaslighting. If you were teaching a class on gaslighting, you'd do very well.
Worst DLC yet does not mean terrible.
I mean, I guess he's right.
In a way, he's right. Yeah, but like you're
That's
still
clearly not what. That's not what he's trying to convey.
yeah, he's
gonna act like
conveying
it is.
he's conveying through the video that it's bad. And he literally said in that one comment, like, oh, it's fine to disagree with me, but, it's going to make me sad that FromSoft is heading in this direction. Clearly, you think it's bad. That'd be like me saying, oh, I don't really like Dark Souls 2, and I'd be sad if it went in this direction. Um, but yeah, I didn't say it's bad. Like, what? Dark Souls 2, bro? Um, like, I mean, I'll be the first to say it. Like, I don't like that game. Right? Like, I don't like that game.
Mid Souls
Like,
2.
It's not my thing.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is,
A lot of people agree.
a lot of people agree, right? But a lot of people love that game. A lot of people say that game is better than Dark Souls 1 and 3. Like, I've seen a lot of that before. And, I sit there and I'm like, well, I can kind of understand that. Again, one of my favorite games of all time is Sonic Heroes. It's the perfect example. That game has a lot of flaws. But I kind of find beauty in that, Like, I love so much about that game as a good example. And, I mean, even talking about Dark Souls 2, that game still does things good. There's some things in that game that I think modern games in FromSoft's catalog should do. One of them is... the biggest one for me is... What's it called? Basically, it allows you to respawn bosses. That is so cool. And only Dark Souls 2 has it. For some reason. I'm like, what? Why is that not a thing? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how cool would it be if you could just use an item and then Melania respawns and you can go fight her again? For example.
I don't. Yeah, I'll understand why. What's it called? Did that, but Sekiro did that, but no one else has.
Oh, Sekiro did it?
Yeah, Sekiro did it.
Yeah.
I'm 90% sure that you can do that in Sekiro. You can reach out bosses.
Okay.
So
that. Okay. I was gonna say that might be a menu thing, but I've never played it. That's the only FromSoft game I've never played.
I think it's
through.
something. I think it's post game content.
Okay. Okay.
I just know I've heard people talk.
All right. Yeah, like I was saying, like, I don't enjoy that game. And hell, like, subjectively, I look at it and I'm like, I kind of fucking hate this game to some extent. But that game is just so, well, controversial, really.
Yeah, it's the most controversial FromSoft game
by a long mile. And like, I'll meme and I'll say it's bad. I'll do it. I'll meme. I'll be like, yeah, Dark Souls 2 sucks. It's bad. But in reality, I don't know about that. I really don't. Like, I would need to play it again.
And it's bad in comparison to the others, but it's not necessarily bad in its own regards.
Yeah, and like he's saying in this video, like, I want to look at the positives of these games best I can, because, like, sure, I can point out the flaws, but everyone can. And honestly, listening to this, I'm like, shit. Negativity is really, really popular in this space. It really is. It gets clicks too, so I don't know, man.
What's the biggest thing? Is it gets clicks.
Yeah.
Well, to use this as an example, he is absolutely distorting the reality of the situation to save face. There is absolutely no other takeaway from the information that he provided that gives room for any other interpretation than that he thinks the DLC is terrible. At what point does it stop being the audience's mistake for interpreting him incorrectly and start being his fault for failing to articulate his experience, for failing to critique. Critical analysis, skill issue. Because if you make a review of a game that is over half an hour long, and then another video, which is a response video that is over an hour long, and I still have no idea how you feel about a game, you have absolutely failed as a critic. If you don't think it's terrible, what is it? Is it good? Is it average? You haven't told me how you actually feel about it. I can't relate my experience to yours because I don't know what your experience is. All I know is the things that you don't like about it, and that's everything. Why don't you think this game is terrible? Why do you make that
True.
statement and refuse to elaborate on it? I'm going insane. He also says this about his defense of Elden Ring boss design
Again,
video.
like I said, look, 307,000 views. And then you go to the critique. They're both very, like, look at that, right? But they're heavily connected.
That just because he is defending base game Elden Ring doesn't mean that I am wholly in love with what I am defending.
Elden Ring has truly given me the best of times. I said repeatedly to my friends that this is my personal favorite game of all time.
Feeble said this is his favorite game. Does he not like video games? I legitimately can't tell anymore. Do we need a lore channel to interpret Feeble's incomprehensible FromSoft opinions? This represents to me the death of this style of critique, because I don't even know how these people, even after 1 hour videos, actually feel about the game anymore. Demodcracy posted his follow-up review saying all the positive things about Shadow of the Erdtree that he didn't mention in his original review because it wasn't in the style he'd affected. We're not getting honest responses. We're not getting critical analysis. This weird hybrid criticism has snowballed to a point where the critique isn't even present at all. Now it literally is just criticism. It's just, here's what I didn't like about it, but said in the nastiest possible way to hold your attention and farm your engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I do think there is an element to this that is cynically designed for more views. Joseph
Exactly
Harrison
what we
is
were
very
saying.
successful doing this, and these critics want that. They're playing it
It's
up
no,
for the video.
It's no different than
Joseph
I
himself.
say it's no different. This is kind of a bad comparison, but the best way I can put it, it's like how Charlie will say, like, the so-and-so situation is crazy in his title. So it's like, oh, well, what happened? Oh my
What
gosh.
happened?
It's like,
Yeah.
OMG,
It's clickbaity.
Charlie's covering this topic that I know about.
Not
So, okay,
clickbaity,
you know,
but like not click farming. There really isn't a good way to put it, yeah. But it gets
it's
clicks.
similar. Exactly. Why did you not do it? And it's not in a scummy way, at least in Charlie's review.
Yeah, in
It's
Charlie's
just a
case.
It's just a matter. He does something that works, but he doesn't clickbait because he does.
Yeah,
do
he
exactly
does
what
explain it.
He explains exactly what he said he was going. So it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, they're not even talking.
A shattered masterpiece. Where's
Yeah.
the talking about the masterpiece part?
Yeah, exactly. And that's literally this guy's point. It's like, well, if you're gonna say that, then say it. Don't just say it in the title.
Don't pussyfoot around, bro.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I don't know, like, for example, pulling something positive out of Shadow of the Erdtree, because that's where we started. I loved Verlana's fight. I love the art. Like, look, exploring, you know, while a lot of people don't like it, that was my favorite part of the game.
For me, I didn't like the exploring that much because it felt like a drag. But I mean, different opinions.
Yeah, exactly. Like you value things a little bit differently, you know. Like I fought the bosses, and then, I mean, personally, I just wasn't impressed the majority of the time. But then, like, I would get to new areas, and I'd be like, wow, I'm finally over here. I don't think anything will compare to when I got to, what is it? Dragon Peak? Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
That area is so incredibly cool looking. Now, I would be lying if I said I wasn't like, kind of disappointed by, the bosses you have to fight there, but like simultaneously, what the fuck else would it be? It's called Dragon Peak. You're fighting dragons. I can't really bitch about that. And why would I? It's still a cool ass area. You know what I mean? So, I don't know.
Says that he plays it up for the video. Feeble does too. There is no honesty here. There is no actual interpretation or insight. But even though they're playing it up, even though it's a bit they're doing, there is still this unbelievable narcissism that this is all for the greater good. It's why glazing has become a dirty word. It's why positivity is toxic, because although these critiques play into the insult comedy,
Bro, I love
the videos are for the artist. They're for the developer. They're not for me. They're for Miyazaki. Often in these reviews, these talking points are made in direct address to Miyazaki. They're negging him.
What? Wait.
Pegged?
Making examples of pegging and dating include making critical comments about a person's appearance or clothing, teasing them for their interest or hobbies, or belittling their accomplishments. So, okay, that's so that right there,
It's going so
bro. This happens all the time with this series, right? With like people around it, people will constantly like belittle accomplishments of others, But
you beat millennia? Yeah, okay, don't do it blindfolded, dumb bitch.
yeah, like people meme on it now, but like there are people like that. People do that with Kingdom Hearts too. They do it all the time. It's like, please stop.
It's not a critique. That's a Trojan horse. They're giving suggestions for future patches.
Wait, the best example is when, and my friend, she had to experience this with fucking her boyfriend. Legitimately. It was, wow, you're using a bleed build? Pfft, scoff. Literally with her boyfriend at the time.
That's insane.
Like, how the fuck... Like, what... It's like the dudes who be like, wow, you're not a hardcore gamer like me. I play fucking Warzone. Like, what are you talking about? Let them play whatever they want.
You play games or you play... like Kingdom Hearts. Dude, what the fuck? You play fucking COD, bro? Are you even a real gamer?
Yeah, it could even be like that, for real. Like, what... Like, okay, so what? So if someone wants to just play, like, I don't know, Minecraft. Like, I don't like that game, but I'm not going to be like, you're not a real gamer. Especially to your fucking, like, a girl you're into, or a guy you're into, even, or, like, yada yada, right? Like, what the fuck? Like, bro, go shave your fucking neck beard. Jesus.
They're telling FromSoft how to make the next game. They're not critics, they're amateur game designers. Joseph Anderson says in his review that he thinks good criticism is a gift to creatives, and that for me says everything about how he perceives his role as a critic. His intention isn't to interpret the developer's intent or communicate the effectiveness of how that translates to player experience. His intention is to give this lovely gift to the developer. That's not critique. That's not the purpose of critique. But what's more infuriating is that he says it's not about dishing it out. I like to receive it too, when the entire opening and closing sections of this review are Joseph responding to his critics with both sarcasm and open hostility. He doesn't like receiving criticism at all. He fucking hates it. Within his own community, people acknowledge that he is bad at taking criticism.
Oh, wow.
I've seen an article citing the Joseph Anderson effect, which is the need to fill out your review with preemptive arguments to stop disagreement before it happens. Critics don't do that. They don't need to. They don't care this much about people who disagree. During a stream where Joseph plays Danganronpa, he makes a mistake, blames the game, and then freaks out when chat calls him stupid. After reflecting, he says this
For the record, I still think I'm right. I still think that the game is wrong. But proving that and really showing if I'm wrong or if Chad is wrong would take a long time, and it would involve studying the game and going through every single non-stop debate, which still might happen because some people in chat aren't letting it go.
You can't prove an opinion. You can't cling to subjectivity and then make a claim that you can prove your opinion correct. It's not an opinion if you believe you can do that. It's a fact. It's Joseph asserting that his opinion is fact. When asked about which of his videos are his favorites, Joseph says here that his favorite is his Odyssey review because he feels that the argument he made was irrefutable. You can't claim that your subjective opinion is irrefutable. Scientists don't do that. Scientific theories are called theories because they're just that, theories. Joseph Anderson is more confident about his opinions on Super Mario than Albert fucking Einstein is about mathematics. Your job isn't to make the definitive take on a video game. It's to provide your take, your personal take. The unbelievable arrogance to believe that your interpretation is irrefutable. It's unreal. How can you say that you aren't attempting to present your opinion as fact and then say that you think you can prove your opinion correct or that it is irrefutable? That isn't the role of the critic in either.
You know what's irrefutable? Nah. Elganon and Gillinane are epic.
No. The ancient elven gods.
The ancient elven gods, Elganon and Gillinane, bro. They slap. That's irrefutable.
The definition.
Oh, no,
the critic that does critical analysis doesn't believe that there is one irrefutable interpretation, nor does the critic offering constructive criticism. That would be insane. Joseph's perception of his role as a critic goes beyond either definition. What does he think his job is? And if I argue with these critics about their talking points, these irrefutable talking points about indefensible problems, I'm halting progress of what could be a better game. I'm not doing my due diligence as a gamer. I'm not serving the cause because I'm just a simp that just wants yummy from slop, and I don't care about the quality because I'm a cult-like minion and I'll accept whatever they give me. I just want my game, Daddy FromSoft. But while all these critics talk to Miyazaki about how to fix his game, has anyone actually listened to him? In literary criticism, there are different theories that we can use to critically analyze a text. One theory is that of authorial intent. This is the meaning intended by the person who created it. In video games, this has been adapted to the intended experience, the way that the developer has intended you to experience the game. If a critic applies the theory of authorial intent, or let's just call it developer intent, it is the role of the critic to interpret what the developer wants you to think and feel. That is what Joseph Anderson and Feeble King and many other critics like them mean when they say the intended experience. This is what they mean when they assert the way that they think you are supposed to play. They are interpreting the developer intent using critical analysis. Feeble says that developer intent has shifted in Elden Ring. Well, not Elden Ring base game, Shadow of the Erdtree. That it's become only about boring trial and error.
FromSoft has been adding cheap trial and error difficulty to their games for a long time.
Learning movesets instead of intuiting them.
It's about hiding the intended way to play behind obscurity so that you either need to die hundreds of times through trial and error learning the boss, or you have to research challenge runner footage to learn the boss.
And extreme difficulty.
True.
Why put effort into making the game easier when it can be hard instead?
But the difficulty was never the point.
Matthew Matosis quoted Miyazaki as saying, "Difficulty was never the point."
Joseph Anderson echoes this, saying the difficulty is now at a stage where it's like squeezing a pineapple and that it isn't worth the juice.
So while I am sure I would have enjoyed fighting them in this way if I put all that time in, would that enjoyment have been enough to justify the time investments?
He says that it's not that it's difficult, it's that it relies on trial and error, which makes it
Oh,
boring.
it gets so easy.
Feeble references Matthew Matosis' video that
So, a good example of this is actually, like, Boost Sonic games, ironically. Especially, like, Sonic Unleashed. Like, Sonic Unleashed has the hardest modern levels, and it's not because, like, well, one of them is pretty damn difficult, to be honest, but they have a lot of trial and error. But the beauty of that is you play and you learn and you get better as you go. That's the beauty of trial and error games. Like, I'm not a fan of like roguelikes. You know that. But
Elatro,
that's
just played Elatro.
that's legitimately a roguelike. You play and you learn and you get better every time. That's how a lot of games are. That's how you develop your skills
Dude,
playing.
if you think about it, every game is actually a roguelike.
Dude, you're right. Fuck Souls games, bro.
Dude, it's like the roguelike. It's like
It's,
the roguelike
Dark
of
Souls is the
roguelikes, bro.
roguelike of Metroidvanias.
Inspired Joseph Anderson.
Now, it's no secret that Miyazaki, the director of the previous two Souls games, wasn't brought back as the director for Dark Souls 2, but his insight into the previous games can still say a lot about this game. In practically every interview he's ever taken since the release of Demon Souls, Miyazaki is asked to comment on the difficulty of the Souls games, and the answer that he gives, over and over again, is that difficulty was never the point.
I call bullshit.
He's about to get every interview.
Real quick.
He's gotta get every interview.
He said something here that when I read this or skimmed through it earlier. Something about that part. Okay, unfortunately in the difficulty was never the point section, it looks like I've attributed a quote in one article to Miyazaki that was actually paraphrased by the writer of the article, Keza McDonald. The full quote: Demon Souls was born out of a desire to return gaming to its fundamentals, that is, to re-embrace the trial and error and difficulty that we used to take for granted, and leave the player to work things out for themselves. From the outset, we started making it based on a back-to-basics concept. Says Miyazaki, we wanted a game-like game, something that was fun in the way games used to be, and we were confident that we could do it. Okay. Alright. Makes sense.
Here's Miyazaki on Demon Souls. Demon Souls was born out of a desire to return gaming to its fundamentals, that is, to re-embrace the trial and error and difficulty that we used to take for granted and leave the player to work things out for themselves. Here's Miyazaki on Dark Souls. Demon Souls was known for its incredible difficulty. With Dark Souls, there is no intention to decrease the difficulty at all. Actually, we intend to increase the difficulty. He goes on. The difficulty is not dependent on the skill level of the user. We have not created a game where the players who react faster or press buttons faster fare better than others. Second, when a player dies, we try to leave a sense of, maybe if I try a different strategy, I can succeed and continue making progress. You know that core system of the Souls series? That one trademark element that every Souls-like game has? That thing that when you die, you leave your souls behind and then you need to pick them up again without dying or risk losing them? Here's Miyazaki on that. The main concept behind the death system is trial and error. The difficulty is high, but always achievable. Everyone can achieve without all that much technique. All you need to do is learn from your deaths how to overcome the difficulties. Overcoming challenges by learning something in a game is a very rewarding feeling, and that's what I wanted to prioritize in Dark Souls and Demon Souls. Here's Miyazaki on Dark Souls 3. Ever since Demon Souls, I've really been pursuing making games that give players a sense of accomplishment by overcoming tremendous odds. We've added new items and weapons over the course of the series, and having a certain level of difficulty adds value to those because they incentivize players to experiment more with character builds and weapon loadouts. Moving on to Bloodborne, with Demon Souls and Dark Souls, we always wanted players to feel a sense of accomplishment. That's the only reason we went with a higher difficulty, and in this game too, we want players to feel that sense of accomplishment. Here's Miyazaki on Sekiro. We don't want to include a difficulty selection because we want to bring everyone to the same level of discussion and the same level of enjoyment. So we want everyone to first face that challenge and to overcome it in some way that suits them as a player. And finally, here's Miyazaki on Elden Ring. If we really wanted the whole world to play the game, we could just crank the difficulty down more and more, but that wasn't the right approach. because the sense of achievement that players gain from overcoming these hurdles is such
Those
a
are one of the
fundamental
biggest things
part of the
surrounding Baldur's
experience.
What?
is that everyone was like, "Oh, why are you such a difficulty option?" And he said, "Because we've never had one, so why would we have one now?
Yeah.
Why would we change that? Why would we change a fundamental part of our games?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we need a difficulty option in these games. No, not at all.
You might as well just make a different game if you're gonna do that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, they could have made Sekiro like that, because it's completely different for the most part, in my opinion, right? From what I've seen. Like, it relies solely on, like, stance breaking, right? So, it's not even like you build your own character. You're playing as,
A predetermined character.
yeah, exactly.
Turning down difficulty would strip the game of that joy, which in my eyes would break the game itself. So, that's a lot of Miyazaki. Sorry about that. But I hope that you can see that it's always been about trial and error, and it's always been about difficulty. It is fundamental to the series, and it always has been. It is also about experimentation and allowing the player to fight each fight in the way that they intend. And it's about learning and overcoming challenges through struggle so that victory has a real tangible sense of accomplishment. That is the developer's intent. That is the intended experience. But let's leave all of that aside for a moment and just talk about the difficulty. Because you know what I didn't find from all of my research, all the interviews that I read from Miyazaki? No evidence that he has ever said the words, difficulty was never the point. Nowhere. Show it to me if you've got it. I can't find it. From all my research, it
Damn.
doesn't exist. And every article that I've found where he's been asked about the difficulty, he's actually said that it was the point, that it's always been the point. It was his inspiration for making these games. He wanted them to be
Wait,
difficult.
so did Matthew Matosis deadass make a, like an urban legend with Miyazaki? What the fuck?
Maybe.
Because I've heard that a lot. Have you? Like, that difficulty was never the point? I've heard that many times.
Yeah, I think I've heard it a couple times.
Matthew Matosis doesn't just quote him as saying this once. He says that he said it over and over again in practically every interview he's ever taken.
I think if I have heard
it's a complete
it was
lie.
the Demon Souls part.
Mm-hmm.
Where people said that whenever he made Demon Souls, difficulty wasn't the
Yeah, for sure.
thing. So kind of. I think it's more so people
Mm-hmm.
thought that.
People ran with it.
And no, yeah.
Kind of wild.
Over 2 million people have seen this video. Countless people have used it as evidence to support their argument that the game has gotten too hard. If you can find one article where Miyazaki says difficulty was never the point, those exact words, then fine, I'll cop that. But there is absolutely no way that Miyazaki has said this over and over again in practically every interview. Right now, at the time that I'm recording this, if I type with inverted commas, difficulty was never the point, and then Miyazaki into Google, the only things that show up are people talking about Matthew's video. I know the accusation that I'm making that Matthew lied is serious. I wanted to do my due diligence and see if Matthew just misquoted Miyazaki, and it was an honest mistake. So I tried a bunch of different combinations of words to see what I could find that is in any way similar to what he was saying. There is only one thing that I've found that is remotely close to what Matthew is quoting. I found this one excerpt that a few different people were quoting in comment sections. It seems like it's come from a Game Informer interview, which has since been taken offline, so I can't find the original interview. But this is the only thing I can find that's anywhere near close. Even still, it's very...
Okay, so having the game be difficult was never the goal. What we set out to do was strictly to provide a sense of accomplishment. We understood that difficulty is just one way to offer an intense sense of accomplishment through forming strategies, overcoming obstacles, and discovering new things. Our goal of a sense of accomplishment was the basis of the game since the early stages of development, and we never strayed from that. Okay.
very different to the one that Matthew presents. Having the game be difficult was never the goal. What we set out to do was strictly to provide a sense of accomplishment. We understood that difficulty is just one way to offer an intense sense of accomplishment through forming strategies, overcoming obstacles, and discovering new things. Our goal of a sense of accomplishment was the basis of the game since the early stages of development, and we never strayed from that. Miyazaki is saying that the difficulty was designed to instill a sense of accomplishment from forming strategies and overcoming obstacles. That's why the difficulty is there. It's not to draw you into the world. It's for the satisfaction that you feel when you achieve victory, not the difficulty itself. It echoes what he was saying about the challenge being about learning and not reaction time or reflexes. Everyone can do it. You just need the patience to overcome. But that doesn't mean it isn't meant to be hard. It just means the purpose of it isn't to cater to your victim complex. It's to make you feel really, really good when you win. That was the goal. If this is what Matthew is quoting, then it's still very different to what he's saying in this video. Because this quote isn't what people are copy-pasting into comment sections all over the internet. They're saying difficulty was never the point, it was meant to draw you into the world. And even if this is what Matthew is quoting, and this is what he meant, he didn't say this over and over again in practically every interview. He said it once, and then said it was the point in every single other interview. Even if you feel like this quote is close enough to what Matthew is saying, it is still incredibly dishonest to quote him in the way that he did. He still lied about what he said and how many times he said it. And he ignored all the times that he said the opposite of what he is quoting him as saying. That is serious. Just as Joseph Anderson said in his Subjectivity is Implied video, people have been repeating this sentiment over and over again because they trusted an unsupported source. They trusted Matthew Matosis. He has changed the way that people perceive the intended experience, not by providing an opinion,
He literally created it,
but providing a fact that is
Yep.
wrong. He did not say those words in practically every interview he's ever taken. He said the opposite.
Good catch.
Difficulty
then.
was always the point.
It's wild.
And before we
Yeah, I
say,
had
well,
a
we
feeling,
can't blame Feeble for
like-
misquoting this, he was fed bad intel, he's also guilty of misquoting literature and not providing his sources.
Albert Camus once said, "The struggle itself to the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy." This sounds good on paper,
One must
but
imagine the
honestly,
tortoise
that,
happy.
just like with what Nietzsche said, man needs a reason to suffer.
First off, and I do hate to do this, I really do, but I have to, it's Camus. If you're quoting literary figures in an attempt to sound smart, you know, at least get their name right. That's like saying William Shakespeare. Feeble completely misinterprets Camus' essay.
Shakespeare.
His quote from Nietzsche, it doesn't exist. You know Nietzsche,
What?
the famous nihilist, nihilism being the theory that there is no inherent meaning in life, no reason. Nietzsche wouldn't say that. He loved suffering, the big weirdo. He was all about it. What I think Feeble is talking about is this quote here. The fact that there was no answer to the question, he screamed, "Why do I suffer?" Man, the bravest animal and most prone to suffer, does not deny suffering as such. He wills it. He even seeks it out, provided he is shown a meaning for it, a purpose of suffering. The meaninglessness of suffering, not the suffering, was the curse that lay over mankind so far. This is the only thing close to what Feeble is saying Nietzsche said, but Feeble doesn't understand this at all. What Nietzsche means when he says meaningless suffering is life. Life to Nietzsche is meaningless suffering, all of it, womb to tomb. He was a grim dude. The suffering that Nietzsche says man wills, the suffering man desires, is suffering that can be overcome, because when suffering is overcome, man has value. That is what Nietzsche meant. Nietzsche believed that suffering is necessary for the highest value of life to be achieved. What he definitely didn't say is man needs a reason to suffer, because that is a thing he would never say. What Nietzsche believed was the complete opposite. Miyazaki said this in an interview about the difficulty of Dark Souls. Hardship is what gives meaning to the experience. Miyazaki agrees with Nietzsche. You have to put in effort to get satisfaction. The pineapple has to be difficult to squeeze in order for the juice to taste good. That's why Sisyphus is happy, because his struggle is giving him meaning. It's his purpose. When he rolls that rock up the hill an infinite number of times, he takes satisfaction in the task by acknowledging the difficulty and focusing on getting better each time. Because if it was easy, it would be boring. there would be no satisfaction. It would be pointless. And you may not agree with what Camus says here, you may not agree with Nietzsche, you may not like the level of difficulty that these games have gotten to, but don't misquote them to strengthen your point when they in fact say the complete opposite. You may think I'm overreacting here, but I hope, through Joseph Anderson's own words, that you see the importance of providing sources that are supported. Whew. I don't know if you're as angry as I am, but I'm angry. Let's take a rage break. Just a quick rage break.
Oh my god.
Okay, phew. I feel better. Let's get back to it.
funny,
Okay,
man.
let's
Yeah, he
break
is.
down the question of why difficulty is satisfying. Let's talk about why Sisyphus is happy. Intrinsic reward. In this review, Feeble talks about intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. I wouldn't be surprised if he stole that from a different Matthew Matosis video, this one. Matthew's video is interesting, but I don't think he defines his terms clearly, which could be why Feeble stumbles over his explanation of the terms in his video.
There are two types of rewards for exploration. Intrinsic rewards that are inherently enjoyable, like a beautiful view or a fun boss, and extrinsic rewards like increasing character stats.
Intrinsic reward is not a fun boss or a pretty view. Intrinsic reward is the feeling that you have fighting the boss. It's not the boss itself. It's not the view, it's how you feel looking at it. Intrinsic, like internal. Extrinsic, like
All right, let's read this. Intrinsic. A person with intrinsic motivation wants to do a task for the pleasure involved in doing the task itself. Example, you hang out with friends because it's fun to do, not because you're forced to. You travel because the adventure is really exciting, not because someone gave you money to do it. Extrinsic. A person with extrinsic motivation wants to do a task in order to receive an external reward or avoid a punishment. Example, if you eat your vegetables, you will get your dessert, so you eat them to get the reward. If you don't do your homework, you will get a detention, so you do your homework to avoid the punishment. Okay.
external. Intrinsic rewards are the ones that come from within you the player, not the character in the game. You may get extrinsic reward for going to work, but get little intrinsic reward if you hate your job. In the same way that you may grind for 10 hours in an MMO for a min-maxed weapon and not have any fun.
Me and
It
Liza
depends on
B.
what you value that determines whether the effort was worth it. Making progress on your journey after being stuck for a good amount of time can be extrinsic motivation, and finishing a game can be extrinsic motivation if it gives you a cool weapon or a new mode. There is also extrinsic motivation in having bragging rights for beating a really hard game, a high score. The respect from others is external, it's extrinsic, but joy is not extrinsic. Joy is intrinsic. You can get joy from extrinsic reward, it feels good to get money, but the emotion is not the reward, the money is. The value is dependent on the priority that you place on monetary gain. This is why money doesn't buy happiness, but it can help if you don't have much. Getting stronger can be good extrinsic reward, but the feeling of satisfaction from beating enemies more easily comes from how much you value strength. It is not the reward itself. Here's an example. You're a professional soccer player, and you play soccer because you love the game. You love the sport of it, and you enjoy the feeling of victory. Your intrinsic reward is the love of the game and of competition. Then you get scouted, and suddenly you're playing for the big leagues, and you find yourself with an enormous salary. Now you have intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. But studies show you can have too much reward, and that can change your motivation. If you get a lot of money for playing a game, but it doesn't matter how you perform, then you're not really motivated to put in more effort. And that is what we mean when we say people stop doing it for the love. You're no longer motivated intrinsically. You're motivated extrinsically. It doesn't matter how hard you work for it because the reward will always be there. You get the same payout even if you play badly or lose. I played WoW for a few years a while back. I know. MMOs sort of work in phases. In one phase, the game may require a significant time commitment to grind for the best weapons. You may need to kill the same boss 100 times, but when you get that one drop, you're the envy of all your friends. That weapon, the strength it gives, or the appearance, is the extrinsic reward, so is the envy. But the satisfaction of putting in the work and getting what you wanted is intrinsic. The joy is intrinsic, that's satisfaction. Not everyone is willing to put up with the struggle of the grind, but you did. You did it, And the fact that not everyone can do that is its own reward.
Jeez.
It's the competition. It's the sport of it. But it's also the scarcity. It's why when you play Diablo or any looter shooter like Borderlands or something, you don't get an upgrade every time. Some of the time it is stuff that is useless. That brings more excitement because you don't know what will drop. It's why gambling is so popular despite the house always winning.
Gotcha,
but then enough
baby.
people complain they aren't getting the reward they're craving in the time that they're investing, so the development team responds. Now, instead of getting one very strong weapon that is very difficult or time-consuming to get, every time you kill a boss, you get a very small incremental stat stick to your overall power. And everyone is happy for a little while, until everyone realizes that now everyone is strong and there's no value in power and no excitement in finding what may drop. You just press the button and you get what you want. If you've heard the term Skinner box, that's what that means. It's a form of operant conditioning. If the rat presses the button and the food comes out, the rat gets the enjoyment of the food, and when he's hungry, he'll eat. But if the rat presses the button and sometimes food comes out, well, now we have a game, baby. Now we're gambling. Now we have intrinsic reward. There is satisfaction when we get what we want because there's a chance
Yes, I
that
think
we
a
want.
rat
There is
gambling
joy.
is wild.
It is fun.
I know, right?
If people don't need to work for it, if they always get the food, then there's no stakes. There's no competition. Everyone's a winner. So everyone gets mad enough that they yell at the big bad games company to make the game fun again like it used to be in the old days. Blizzard listens, changes it back to the way it was, everyone's happy. Until, and so on and so on and so on. This is the World of Warcraft loop
What an
of
intelligent
intrinsic
young
and
man.
extrinsic reward. The satisfaction is in the struggle. If it was easy and everyone could do it, it would be less valuable to defeat a boss in this game. If you don't work for it, if you throw in the towel and brute force everything, then of course that boss won't be fun. Of course you don't get the satisfaction from beating it. If you press the button and the boss dies, then the whole internet would be complaining that the game was too easy, and there would be no satisfaction in playing it. Everyone would be yelling at the big bad games company that their game is too easy. You have to struggle for the reward to be meaningful. This is why Nietzsche says that suffering creates meaning. If you don't want to struggle, you don't get the intrinsic reward you're looking for. It's the difference between beating a boss and feeling like this.
Kill him here, right?
Or beating a boss and feeling like this. When I first...
There's no way.
My reaction to Gaius is my reaction to Gaius and Radon.
It was. Like... And you didn't even have a build like Asmon did. And Asmon had, like... Well...
I had bonk build.
Yeah.
I literally just had... I hit thing hard, but
Right.
I hit thing hard with a long windup.
Mm-hmm.
So I still had to play the game.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I do think there's a big difference, like, to how I felt personally when I played Elden Ring the first time and beat it for the first time. For the most part, I admittedly felt like Asmon did right there when it came to like beating Elden Beast when I first beat it. I was like, okay, cool, it's finally over. I wasn't juiced about it. I was just like kind of over it. But beating Melania gave me that feeling that Kai had, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Promise Consort Radon gave me that feeling. That's why I don't hate him as much as you do, I guess. I think it's because it did give me that rewarding feeling when I did beat him. But
It just felt like a chore to try to beat him.
yeah, I don't... Maybe it was because of my OP build. But you would think my reaction would have been more like Asmongold. Because I had that such a like overpowered and good build, right? But it wasn't. My hands were shaking when I beat Promise Consort Radon. Like, it's odd.
First played Dark Souls, Manus took me a full weekend.
Wow.
I was stuck on Bloodstarved Beast for ages.
Mhm.
There is this crazy
Yeah, me
narrative
too.
that these games were never hard, or it was never about the difficulty, or they used to be fair and honest, and it's wrong. These games have always been hard. It's just that as they've gotten harder, we've gotten better, so it seems like they're easier in comparison. It's the rose-tinted glasses. Think about the first game in the series that you ever played, and tell me how long it took for you to beat the hardest boss in that first ever run. Because I'm betting that it wasn't easy, and you felt really damn good when you killed them.
Yeah.
True.
True. I mean, so my history with these games is weird. My first game I played Dark Souls was Dark Souls 2, but I barely played it when I first played it. I think I told you that, right? And then like honestly, played Dark Souls 1 after that, didn't like it, so I went and like played Dark Souls 3. Um like Dark Souls 3 quite a lot. And I didn't even beat that. But then I played Bloodborne, and that's when I fell in love with the series. Because Bloodborne I vibe with in so many ways. Gascoigne never been that bad for me. Pretty damn easy for me on a personal level.
Yeah.
Without the fucking box too. I
Easy
didn't even
box.
know that
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
I played blind on my first playthrough for the most part, up to a certain point anyway. Um, and then I got to Bloodstarved Beast, and I don't think I died too much on my first playthrough, but it was probably the first boss in the series that I actually felt legitimately like challenged by. Um, and nowadays I go back and I'm like, this isn't that bad. Like this is pretty. This is. Well, I know what to do though, right? I know what to do. I learned to fight. um, and that's beautiful, right?
Feeble says in his Defense of Elden Ring video that the game is pointless trial and error until you unlock the fun mode. I hate this. This is exactly what I talk about in my other videos, this idea that the learning process is a slog that is only fun when you win. No. The fun is in improving. I don't mean to get all Sesame Street on you here, but learning is fun. We feel good when we learn. The act of recognizing a problem, forming a theory, and testing that theory is really gratifying, especially when our assumption is correct. We learned. Chemicals rush to our brain. We feel good. But here's a question. Do you need to be taught to learn? Both Feeble King and Joseph Anderson talk about how they want more visual indicators, things like jumping attacks. Feeble says he wants tutorials where you learn openings. They want clearer text boxes. They want to intuitively know how to deal with more situations as they happen in the moment.
Dog,
Intuition
all I
and
want
intuitive
is to
design
fucking
are
hit
terms that both Joseph and
the
Feeble
camera to be
use a
fixed.
lot. This is a constant thing for both these critics and many others on the platform. The thing of it being a failure of design if you don't know what to do or you get stuck. And I think this all stems from the belief that a game needs to teach you everything. It's this obsession with intuitive design. But if you take a look at Matthew Matosis's description in that intrinsic reward video,
It should teach you some things, not everything. I think it should teach you some things, but I don't think it should teach you everything, you know? I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
he says this: a great game cannot necessarily be made just by applying a set of principles. And I think he's right here. Because so many of these critics
Like
reference
Bloodborne does
intuitive
it
design
perfectly.
as if it is the core principle of all video games, and if they do not do this, then they have failed. Intuitive design is defined by making products easy to use. Intuitive comes from intuition, which is defined by using or based on what one feels to be true even without conscious reasoning. It is instinctive. This is not the defining principle of all video games. Many video games do require conscious reasoning. They require thought. They do not rely solely on instinctive or intuitive input. Elden Ring is
Dude,
one of those
I
games.
hate-
Miyazaki has told us that himself. He has also told us that this is not a game that is intended to be easy. Difficulty was the point. Now, that's not to say that Elden Ring doesn't teach you mechanics intuitively. It does lead and guide you in certain directions, and it does prompt a certain reaction from you at times, but for the most part, you're left on your own to figure things out. Not only that, it will also lead your intuition astray and guide you into traps. This game is evil. It hates you. That's why it's so great. Because Margit doesn't want you to win. He wants you to abandon your foolish ambitions. It's your job to prove him wrong. The game does teach you.
Margit
It just
is
teaches
so
you in a
good.
different way. It doesn't teach you through intuition. It teaches you through trial and error. Feeble calls this move streamer bait, but it's just trial and error. In order to learn that you need to jump this attack, it's most likely going to kill you first. You aren't
Shots up,
supposed to intuit
dude.
what to do.
My friend, she fucking dodges it.
Yeah, you just got jumped.
No, she dodges it, dude. She figured out
Oh.
how to dodge it.
What?
Yes!
Do that?
Yes! I didn't know that till watching her. She figured out how to dodge the attack.
Just jump up, so now you can dodge.
No, she did it before jumping it.
Really, jumping's still easier, but that's insane.
Yeah, it blew my mind.
On sight. You're supposed to make mistakes. You're supposed to make errors. Just like this move from Mesmer. You can intuit this initial attack, but the follow-up is probably going to hit you unless you know it's there. Same with Star Scourge Radahn. You're not supposed to intuit that meteor. You're supposed to go, what the fuck is that? And then die
Max,
to it.
yeah.
You may think that's streamer bait, but it's nothing new. That is the design philosophy of this series. That's why these games feel intimidating and often really nerve-wracking, because bosses don't have big, glowy weak points. You don't walk into a room, notice 4 pillars, and then see the boss start charging towards you. You don't have a giant swing his arm at you and then lie it on the ground for 20 minutes so that you can run up it and bonk his head, which is now tessellating with the words, "Hit me, you moron." Bosses aren't teaching you to kill them. You need to learn how to kill them. That's what makes them so satisfying to defeat, because you weren't guided to a solution, you discovered it. Trial and error is reliant on you not knowing what
That
you
is
should
what's
do.
really cool about
there
the
needs to
music
be
box.
doubt, otherwise you're not guessing.
If you
You're just
somehow
doing.
find it,
There needs to be the potential
use
for
it,
error, for there
like,
to
wow,
be
what?
trial and error. You need to find a strategy, try it, and experiment to see if it works. I found this comment from Feeble King talking about this. He says that
jeez.
information is taught to the player in every single player game he's ever played. He uses the fact that he didn't need a guide to win in God of War or Devil May Cry to prove his point. Now, I don't need half a brain to tell you these two things are not the same.
Yeah,
The
what?
intended experience is not the same. You're not supposed to feel like a god in Elden Ring. You're not supposed to feel like a cool devil guy with a leather jacket making quips and surfing on demons while you play the electric guitar. You're just a dude named Butthole. You're just a guy. Joseph Anderson talks in his original Dark Souls series about gotcha
Oh my
difficulty.
god, dude.
Moments like the dragon on the bridge,
Comedic
or all those
timing
times
is
you go through the
perfect, dude.
catacombs and
Yeah.
a little imp shanks you in the neck.
Guy named
That's Dark
Butthole.
Souls. That's Elden Ring. He says moments like that don't give you clear enough environmental cues to intuit.
the character he designed to was peak.
Yeah, no, Butthole was pretty good.
Yeah.
But you're not supposed to intuit them. You're supposed to die and then learn from that experience. You know that movie Edge of Tomorrow, where Tom Cruise is just that normal guy, but he's in a war and it's Groundhog Day, and every time he dies, he comes back and it's the same day again? And so every attempt, he learns a little more until he can see
Oh,
every
shit.
attack coming and knows how to deal with it. That's
Dark Souls movie?
That's Elden Ring. Tom Cruise didn't react. He learned. He learned through trial and error. That's the intended experience. The difficulty comes from knowing what to do and when. It's finding your openings and testing what is safe or isn't safe. When is safe to attack and what to attack with. When is safe to heal. What is jumpable. You learn these things through trial and error. You can't know if a boss is safe to punish with a charged R2 until you try it. I think the real problem with
I
how a lot
figured
of
that
people
out with Millennia.
perceive the difficulty in these games is that they think because they've played all the games, they've mastered how they work. But each
No.
new fight is a new test of
Bloodborne
knowledge,
and Elden
not
Ring were
skill. It's a
completely different
knowledge issue.
experiences.
You can't defeat a boss until
Yeah.
you learn them, regardless of how
Dark Souls
mechanically
1
good
and
you
Elden
are.
Ring and
But
Dark
even
Souls
if
3
you
is
never figure out how to
all
dodge every
completely
move,
different games.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is what I was saying. Like,
I hated playing through Dark Souls 1 because of how clunky that was.
Yeah, I don't like any of the games until Dark Souls 3, and even Dark Souls 3 I think is still pretty clunky to me. And it's because I like the smooth gameplay of
Yeah,
Bloodborne, how fast it is.
the reason I like Elden so much is because it's I say modern, it's newer, so it can encapsulate what they were going for the entire time much better with fleshed out mechanics.
Exactly. I just, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of preference, right? Like, you ask me, like, wow, I never want to go play Dark Souls 1 again, personally. Like,
I didn't even want to play it one time.
like, I don't like a lot about that game, but there is a lot to enjoy in it. But, like, it just comes down to preference at that point. Like, in Dark Souls 1, it may not be my thing, but one of the things about the combat is that it's more methodical, you know? Um, since it's so, like, well, clunky to me and to you, um, it is also methodical, where you have to, like, maybe not time. Time isn't the right word, but it's it's just a bit to get used to, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go fight Ornstein and Smo, that's like your biggest like test of your skill in that game, in my opinion, because you're fighting two enemies that actually work pretty well together. Uh, because one is fast and you know
Well,
comes
the
at you.
Godskin duo is Ed Ornstein and Smell with bad AI
Yeah,
because they don't fucking
they don't care.
yeah.
They basically
The
don't care.
shadows of Yarnum. The shadows of Yarnum is the big. One of them's always aggressive.
Hmm.
There's one that's long range. There's one that's always up close. There's one mix it up.
Yep.
One of
That's
them
why
has the aggro.
that's why I
And
say Shadows of
and
Yharnam is one of my favorite boss fights in gaming.
and technically, the second Black Rabbit Brotherhood fight does follow the same philosophy. It just doesn't quite work as well with
Hmm.
the design of the fight. But they do have it where one of them stays aggressive. They switch between who's aggressive, and the other two will kind of passively stay at you. So it's just a matter of finding that balance.
Yeah, or like how you want to tackle these situations. Um, and again, like people will find different things more difficult, and of course it comes down to your interpretation of difficulty too, to some extent. Like, I don't find like any of like I don't find Demon Souls, Dark Souls, or Dark Souls 2 all that difficult usually. I usually find them just kind of annoying. But you get to late game Dark Souls 3 and I'm like, I'm gonna be honest. I find like most of Dark Souls 3 like end game stuff, DLC stuff more like difficult than like Elden Ring as a whole. Like the fights are more challenging to me because they're less of what I'm used to, if that makes sense. They're less against what I'm used to playing. They're like your character is not as fast. Your character is slower. You drink Estus or fucking your flask. You drink that shit slower. It's harder. It's more difficult for me to get used to as a player. It is it is just more difficult for me. But most people will be like, "Well, actually, Elden Ring's the hardest for me." you know, or
Mm-hmm.
Bloodborne is the hardest for me. Difficulty is so subjective. You know what I mean? It's so hard to gauge. I mean, like, another good one is for
Let's
us, we
yeah, get
don't find Orphan of Kos that bad, but Lawrence, for both of us, killed us more than all of the bosses combined, damn near.
Yeah, dude, I finally found someone that shares the Lawrence hate. I was watching him on TikTok. I was like, dude, this boss fucking sucks. It's like, yeah, it does.
Yeah, it really does.
That's fine. I have no idea why Joseph complained about that Godric move so much, because even
This
if
is
we
wild.
take him at face value that move is unreactive,
Yeah, it
this is
is.
how much damage it does. You can get hit by half the attacks in a boss fight and still kill them. There are all hit runs where people literally get hit with every single attack. You don't need to be Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow. You can play the game any way you want, because although the developer's intent was trial and error, Miyazaki also intends you to experiment with your build and take on challenges in your own
Yeah.
way. Feeble says in his defense of Elden Ring videos that the game really clicked for him when he figured out that posture breaking is the intended experience. Feeble says this about abusing posture break on dungeon bosses.
Dungeon bosses that prepare the player for the mainline bosses are turn-based Dark Souls battles that literally are not designed to be played for posture break.
But main bosses can absolutely be abused in exactly the same way. In the challenge run community, we call this scripting. Scripting is when you posture break bosses in such a rhythm
if
that
you
you
watch
can
Bushy,
entirely
for
predict every
example,
move and even skip
cracked.
entire phases. This is me on Godfrey. He's a tough fight, but I made him look like a little Gumby Gumbo. It's not even that hard to do. Anyone could learn how to do this. That is what makes scripting so powerful. You're following a script, but is this the intended experience? Why are daggers or thrusting swords in the game at all? What's the point if posture breaking is the intended experience? Why have any of this stuff? Why have talismans that boost multi-hits? Why have status effects or elemental weaknesses?
Well, yeah,
What's the point of
it's
it
what we
all
were
if
talking
it's not
about
how the
earlier.
developers want you
The
to play?
intended
Feeble
experience
says that
is to
Margit
make
is a
your own
terrible tutorial
experience.
boss because he doesn't teach you how to play. He says that the way
Use
you're supposed to
all
play
the
is to
tools
strafe
at
his
your
attacks
disposal.
and stagger him. But Margit is
Don't
parrying.
use
Play
Is
how
it
you want to
variable?
play.
Isn't that
Don't
the
use
intended experience?
Margit
It
as
was
a
programmed for you
tutorial
to be
boss.
able to do that. Did they intend you to fight him in this way, or is it an option?
complain about
Right
Margit
before you
being
meet
the
Bale in the
tutorial boss, you'll
DLC,
have
you get
to
a
do it
weapon
with
called the
tutorial
Dragon
boss.
Hunter Great Katana,
Exactly.
which does extra damage to dragons. Seems the intention is pretty clear,
Like,
but is using
like
that...
the game leads you to Margit. The game wants you to fight Margit because it's a good big challenge to fight. Either you can fight him then and overcome it how you are, or go do other things and come back and overcome it, right? Like, there's options.
katana to fight Bale the intended experience? Or is it just a strong option? You don't need the Dragon Hunter Great Katana. It's an
No.
option. This is me fighting Radahn at level 1. I didn't posture break him once. Did I play the
I
game
beat
wrong
Bale with a
because I
fire
parried
build.
him? Did I abuse mechanics by infusing with Holy, which he is weak to?
Like,
He is also super weak to Scarlet Rot, which is lore appropriate. He has such low resistance to Scarlet Rot that if you chuck one of these hefty rot pots that you find in the cookbooks everyone hates so much, he's rotted instantly in phase 1. The developers set his resistances to that level. They put that pot in the game. Does that mean it's intended for me to do that? I'm fighting Moog here at level 1, and I'm trying out some different options to see how I want to fight him. I know Moog is weak to bleed, and I want to take advantage of that. I also know he stands still while he's
Yikes.
doing nihil for a good
It's
long
so
while.
funny to
and
me
I want
that
to take
people don't
advantage of that
realize he's
too.
weak to
I
bleed.
decide to use Giza's wheel because it's funny. The thing I quickly learn about Moog, though, is that he works really similarly to Margit and Morgoth. Although his attacks are really delayed, he doesn't take
Well, he
too
is
long to
unending.
recover at the end of his combos, with the exception of a couple big attack windows.
Which I
Meaning
think is a
that
really
despite
neat
his slow
detail.
attacks, I don't really get that many opportunities to build status or posture with a big weapon. I'm also getting spaced out a lot by his blood brain, which makes it even harder. I'm sure I can absolutely defeat him with this weapon, but I want to change it up and see what my other options are to make this fight feel a bit more interactive. I want to see if I can find a setup that's more suited to the fight. So I have a think, and I decide that I want to use a shield and try carry and retaliation to block the blood splatter. So I want to choose a weapon that I can one-hand with my stats that can do lots of damage while he's standing still during nihil. So I think about Wild Strikes, which is a huge move if you can do
Right.
free damage over a long period of time, and it's great for both status procs and poise damage. I decide to use the Jawbone Axe because it has a high base damage and it looks funny. I two-hand the axe, but when I need to, I quickly take out the shield and use carry and retaliation to stop the blood. Not only does it work to stop the blood, it does damage to him at the same time. I spend a good amount of time learning him until I know my best opportunities to attack. I use Wild Strikes during nihil and use my axe's fast attack speed to attack in the middle of combos and not just after. I had this guy downloaded. I almost got clipped at the end with some unlucky blood splatter, but this was a clean kill. And I felt like I really built around his moveset and strategized for that fight. And I did that. I planned that out with my brain.
I like
without the
this.
game
I like this
teaching me. It was
analysis.
really satisfying.
Mhm.
I
But
like
is
this
it the intended
explanation for it.
experience? I was level 1, so probably not. But
You know,
what
I haven't really seen. That might be the most concise explanation of a build or like how he's doing it. Like I've seen, maybe ever. That was really like concise. I liked that.
fucking mask.
would be in this scenario. He's obviously weak to bleed. I could have used a weapon that was much better at doing that. But are you intended to use bleed? Does that make the fight too easy? Does not using it make it too hard? How much
So
damage
silly.
is he
I love
intended
it.
to do to you? How much damage are you intended to do to him? What did the developers
look, he's got
intend
the
for
U
you to
build.
experience here? Is there one developer intended
Yeah,
solve for this fight? No,
The curved
of
swords
course
with
not. The
No,
the raptor's
bro.
feathers.
Dog.
It was literally you. It
Yeah,
was literally
it was me, and then I told you about it, then you did it.
No, I didn't use the curved swords.
Well, no, I told you about the curved swords, and then you got them, and then didn't use them. Oh, he was using the curved swords. I didn't see that.
That's what I was saying. He was literally you.
Well,
Bro.
I
Come
didn't.
back, go
I
back.
didn't use those either.
damage are you intended to do to him? What did the
Shit.
developer
Wait.
use bleed? Does that make the fight too easy? Does
Uh,
not using it make it too hard? How much damage is he
I-
intended to
are
do to you? How
those?
much damage are you
Yeah,
intended
look,
to
No.
do?
it's a curved sword.
yeah, it's
It's some type of curved sword.
what is that? Either way, yeah. I mean, you know what my build was.
To him? What did the developers intend for you
Godskin
to experience
peeler
here? Is
and
there one
the
developer
blade.
intended solve for this fight? No. Of course not. The idea of the intended experience completely falls apart the more questions you ask. The intended experience is for you to play the game your way.
Be right back,
It's
I
a
got
role-playing game, not a character action game. Play how
Alrighty,
you
pal.
want. That's certainly what Miyazaki wanted the experience to be. But there is another literary theory that we can use to interpret a text, and that is the death of the author. Or, in this case, the death of the developer, the death of Miyazaki. The team at
Oh.
FromSoft made this game a sandbox and put a bunch of tools for you to create your experience. The intended experience is
God.
irrelevant because the experience isn't the developer's anymore, it's yours. You create the experience. There is no one way to play, regardless of what some critics may tell you. Developer intent, intended experience isn't a good critical lens to critique a game with this many options. I'd really hate for you to come out in Limgrave and say, where does the game want me to go? It's a real bummer. I hope you don't play like that because the game wants you to go anywhere. That's what it wants. Go. Explore, discover. Yes, that creates
Yeah.
some issues with a disparity in player power. And yes, there are always going to be strategies that work better for some bosses than others. That's called gameplay variety. You're not oppressed because melee isn't as good as summons in the same way that in Street Fighter, choosing Ryu doesn't make you oppressed because Akuma exists. And just because Ryu was the baseline for how Street Fighter was built, it doesn't mean that he is the intended experience. FromSoft games have always had a massive variety of options, and this game is the most of all. You're not wrong for playing it however you want to play, and you're also
Exactly.
not right, because there is no right.
Exactly.
You can use the Wretch starting club with no upgrades and beat the final boss. You can use the Bloodhound's Fang at +10 without defeating one Remembrance boss. You can do that. The developers added that ability in the game. You aren't locked off from it. You aren't abusing any exploits or glitches to make that happen. You aren't working against their intent. It's an option made available to you by them to use if you want it. The world is yours.
I could not agree more. Perfectly well said. Perfectly well said, man.
In the final part of his DLC review, Joseph Anderson compares FromSoft to Bethesda and Elden Ring to Skyrim. He says that with the release of Elden Ring, the problems have mounted to a point that they have become noticeable for people, and criticism shouldn't be silenced because it's going to ruin the studio like it did for them. This is a terrible comparison for so many reasons.
That's
How
confusing.
are we not seeing this? Why are we not talking about this? Comparing the difference between Skyrim, the Fallout games, Oblivion, Morrowind, it's so different to comparing Elden Ring and the other games in this series. There have been so many changes made to the game, so many innovations. He is being disingenuous to suggest that Elden Ring isn't a significantly different game to the others in the series, or that FromSoft are complacent and coasting on easy success. FromSoft aren't coasting. Elden Ring is not Skyrim. FromSoft are not Bethesda. What is he talking about here? A lot of people complained about Oblivion. Heaps of people
Yeah.
thought Morrowind was better and thought there was a
Yeah.
decline in quality. Lots of
Even my fucking father thought that Elden Ring, or not Elden Ring, Jesus, like Morrowind was better. He like talks about that game to this day. Like, like, what?
Lots of people hated Fallout 3, myself included. Well before Skyrim, people were complaining about Bethesda. This is the internet, Joe. Everyone complains about everything all the time. The downfall of Bethesda wasn't caused by audiences not
Sorry, Joe, I got
complaining
distracted.
enough. Starfield came out after Fallout 76.
Right.
Everyone hated that, remember? They weren't insulated against negativity because of toxic positivity. They just really, really liked money. Fans didn't kill Bethesda. Bethesda did.
Yep.
Also, FromSoft fans aren't just waking up and starting to take notice about problems in their games. It isn't a come to Jesus moment. FromSoft fans have been complaining about FromSoft games since Dark Souls. You're one of them, Joe. Remember Dark Souls 2? Anyone? Hello? Matthew's video was posted 10 years ago and has 2 million views. People thought Bloodborne was too hard and bullshit and unfair. People thought Dark Souls 3 was too hard and bullshit and unfair. Remember that? Everyone said it was like fighting Bloodborne bosses with Dark Souls characters, the same way that people now are saying it's like fighting Sekiro bosses with Dark Souls characters, and lots of people didn't like Sekiro either. Remember how every single time a new game from the studio comes out, there is a massive...
What?
Go back to that review, Steam review.
This one?
Zanzibar.
Zanzibar.
Is that a real?
Wait, okay, so let me
Is that
read
a
this.
is that a fucking real character?
Okay, so no spoilers for final boss, please, but I kinda know that it is miserable, just like all the other bosses in the DLC. AoEs all the time, ridiculously hyper-aggressive, combos that never stop or that can be chained with other combos and normal attacks 500% faster than the player. That is the one thing I don't like about Dark Souls. That's the one thing that, like, kills me, is that they are so much faster than you at all times. But that's talking about Dark Souls 3. You know, from my perspective. But this guy's talking about Shadow of the Erd Tree.
I was just laughing at Zanzibar. Forgive me.
More AoEs. I'm not lying when I say that I couldn't even see what Mesmer was doing, let alone locate him during the fight. I can't wait to see what BS the final boss will have. Well, pal, I guess if you're not having fun with Mesmer, like, man, I think the person had a heart attack fighting fucking Radon.
Dark Souls characters, and lots of people didn't like Sekiro either. Remember how every single time a new game from the studio comes out, there is a massive wave of people complaining about how the game is unfair, and a ton of armchair critics make 1-hour video essays saying FromSoft bad? Or they do Joe's thing of saying FromSoft good, but this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad? Lots of people have had problems with FromSoft's design over the years. Joseph is not starting a revolution. Joseph is not a martyr for saying FromSoft has problems. He's not speaking out against the big bad games company when no one else will. There is nothing that he is saying that puts him at risk other than the occasional comment that tells him that he sucks at the game. Joseph says that he's worried that the toxic positivity of fans will continue to suppress the issues of the game to a point where the toxic positivity will turn into toxic negativity. I don't know if he's been on the internet in the last few months, but that is happening right now, and Shadow of the Erd Tree is good. Joe thinks so himself. We're not at Skyrim. We're not at a point where FromSoft has failed to respond to criticism and players are turning on them. Players are turning on them because for over a decade now, they've been fed hour-long video essays telling them all the reasons their favorite masterpiece is actually garbage. They're full to bursting with smug talking points about how the game failed to teach them essential mechanics, and that's why Mesmer pushed their shit in. Joseph Anderson made a 90-minute critique of the DLC, which he loved, and only a fraction of it is him saying what he liked. Most of it is him doing his usual roast comedy shtick, and the rest of it is him responding to his own critics. He spends such a small portion of this positive review actually telling us why he had such an amazing time with it. That is toxic negativity. It's just regular toxicity, and it's not critique. He says that FromSoft have made massive improvements in this game and then goes on to say at the end that they're turning into Bethesda because they're refusing to change. They did, Joe, and you like it. Remember? I think this idea that FromSoft is refusing to change harkens back to a different Matthew Matos's video, Lost Soul Arts of Demon Souls. Feeble mentions it too. A lot of people making negative FromSoft reviews reference this video. They use it like a sacred text that serves as proof that the series is stagnant or lacking innovation. There are a bunch of weird takes in this video. It's so strange to see so many people referencing this, where Matthew says his favorite boss in Bloodborne is Mikolash as proof that Elden Ring is bad.
What? What?
Oh, that's just wrong.
That's a wild take. Mikolash? Mikolash. The fight that...
He's just saying it to...
There's no... I've never heard that in my life. I've never heard a single soul say that. That's insane. Again, like, you can enjoy fights. I can be like, you know what my favorite Bloodborne fight is? The one Reborn. People will look at me like I'm fucking insane for the most part. But, like, that's an opinion you can have. This is certainly an opinion of all time.
I was about to say, truly an opinion of all time.
Yeah, fucking Mikolash. Jeez. Wow.
At one point in the video, Matthew says this.
If these games are going to be iterative sequels, at the very least they could be good at that, but they're not. 5 installments is more than enough time to figure out what makes these games good and iron out the kinks. Many other series have come a lot further in fewer tries.
Do we really believe that? Do we really think Bloodborne is Demon Souls but again? That's such a shallow analysis. To start, there's not many series around that have this many entries in this amount of time that hit this hard. They're on a hell of a run here. Are we really saying the series hasn't evolved since Demon Souls? Have you played that game lately? This is the final boss. He's a little Bubba Boo Boo. In this video, Matthew Matosas pines for the days of Demon Souls when everything was fresh and new. But it's important to note that Matthew isn't talking about this in the context of Elden Ring or the DLC. He's talking about Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, games that many people consider the best in the series. And if we actually think about some of his problems that he talks about in this video, I would argue that they've actually been solved in Elden Ring. Matthew says that Demon Souls has the best non-linear level design in the series. Hard disagree. I played that game recently and 90% of it is very narrow hallways. But
yeah, it is.
Putting that aside, non-linear design is uncontestedly better in Elden Ring.
You know what I mean.
The shift to open world was a huge improvement for non-linearity. We don't actually know how Matthew feels about Elden Ring. I'd say it's likely that he probably wasn't into it or that he doesn't care one way or the other, which is why he didn't feel the need to make a video on it. It's likely that he's just bored with the series, which is completely fine. He's allowed to not be into it, but let's really examine some of the arguments he's making here and see how they apply to Elden Ring. One of the core arguments that Matthew makes here is about the simplicity of the combat. He reduces it to dodge hit, which is something which Feeble also says in his review a lot. People really undervalue the amount of player options
you can say that about
given
any game,
since
really.
Demon Souls. You're so much faster.
Combat-based game.
You have a much more diverse moveset.
Any action game.
You can fucking jump now. Isn't that huge? That's like going from 2D to 3D. I hate going back to the old games and not being able to jump. It feels so weird. Watch any gameplay footage from the people who reference this video as proof that we haven't been given enough new tools to deal with bosses, and I bet my left kidney they are spamming jump heavy attacks. There were less than 30 weapons in Bloodborne, and everyone complained about the lack of variety, and so FromSoft gave us a bazillion weapons in Elden Ring, and no one wants to use them. Matthew makes a point about how there is no difference in how the weapons work, but the damage that comes out of it. Hate that. You could maybe argue that in the early games, but not now. Here's Feeble attempting to adapt that argument to the DLC.
The only meaningful differences between most attacks are the damage, posture damage, how long it takes to come out, and the range.
That's the only difference? The only difference is the damage, posture damage, range, and attack speed? That's it? All of that? This is such a bananas statement.
What?
Any PvP players here? Anyone? What do we think about Feeble's statement that the only difference in weapons is damage, posture, range, and attack speed? The choice between high attack speed and high posture damage is a big one. They make the fights completely different. He says there's no variety in weapons, but in all the footage he's using one weapon. Matthew says that when you hit an enemy, nothing happens but the numbers that come out of it. There's no positive feedback, but that's not the case in Elden Ring. Posture breaking gives you that feedback. That sound? That's crack cocaine. And do you know why it feels so good when that happens? Because you don't know it's coming. Feeble complains about the lack of posture bar a lot. Joseph does a bit too, but you wouldn't get this feeling if you were just waiting for a bar to fill. It comes from the surprise. It's not press the button, get the food. Feeble King says he wants weapons to have more combos and do things like flip
It's
enemies
legit,
up into the air to
what's
set
it
up more
called?
damage.
It's like a high.
Look, this is a combo. And it's guaranteed. If you get that first Giants Hunt on most enemies in the game, it will combo into a charged heavy, which will stagger most enemies and even a lot of dungeon bosses. Charged heavy into jump attacks on heavier weapons will stun the Fire Knights every time. Feeble says he wants weapons to do more cool stuff, but he isn't willing to experiment to learn how to do cool stuff. And don't tell me, well, the game didn't teach me I could do that, when you're getting new weapons, Ashes of War, and upgrade stones every few minutes, and you're kicking rocks saying, why bother? Miyazaki isn't going to sit next to you while you play and gently remind you to press other buttons. You have to play the game yourself. To anyone that agrees with this idea that there's no variation in the weapons,
That's
I
pretty
issue
crazy.
you a challenge. Start a new game, pick a class, run straight to Margit. Just run straight there. Once you beat him, start again. Pick a different class, run straight up to Margit. See how the fight changes depending.
He's so right.
Oh my god, I've been playing wrong this whole time.
Dude, I went from being a faith dex build the first time I played to the second time I played being a dex arcane build to third time I played being a strength int build. Like what? And then I went to a strength faith build. Completely different, all of them.
Depending on what weapon and build you use. See what it's like to fight him with power stance curved swords. See what it's like to use unsheath on the Uchi Katana. Use the S-stock and offhand with magic. See what it's like when you parry him. That makes the fight so different. There is so much variety, but no one wants to take advantage of it because they've been fighting with a great sword since 2009, and even though they're tired of it, they're still too stubborn to use anything else. Even if you stuck doggedly to a pure strength build for a decade, there are still so many possible weapons you can use in Elden Ring with just that, all without using a larval tier. Feeble talks about the fact that he doesn't want to switch builds for new weapons. You don't need to. Any infusible weapon, just infuse it heavy. You're good to go. That's why you have so many of these. You can use most weapon types in the game with any build, and you can use a completely different fully upgraded weapon for each fight in both the base game and the DLC if you want to, all with the same build, no larval tiers. Have at it. Matthew says that the weapon arts of Dark Souls 3 were a step in the right direction. Well, we have so much more of that now, and they do what Matthew was hoping they would do, which is you can combine them with your base moveset for combos. They listen to him. They can increase your movement. They give you extra iframes. They can give you a counter attack. This one's huge. Have you played with Raptor of the Mists? It's a completely different game. Feeble says Ashes of War are useless because you don't have big enough openings to use them. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Everyone complained that in base game Elden Ring, we were fighting Sekiro bosses with no parry mechanic, so they gave us the deflecting hard tier and no one wanted to fucking use it. The core reason Matthew says
Everyone
that he likes
uses
Demon
it,
Souls is the variety in the fights. It's why he likes Mikolash so much, because it's not dodge hit. He likes the gimmick fights. He said this.
Thinking about how to survive a boss by using clever tactics is exactly what a real adventurer would do. In a sense, the battle happens just as much outside the fog door as inside. Because of that, the mindset of the character and
I think
the
what he
player
might have been saying with that comment, though, was like, the people that complain about it don't use it.
align in such a way that it pulls the player further into the experience.
That's exactly what we're talking about here. If you allow yourself more tools, then you give yourself the ability to strategize specifically for the fight. That's using Bleed against Moog. That's Scarlet Rot on Radahn. That's Pierce damage against dragons. That's magic. Yes, that's also spirit summoning. People really came hard for all the people using great shields, but they're doing what Matthew wants. They're planning for the battle. They're strategizing for the fight.
Oh my
Defeating a
god, I
boss
see
by
what you
planning
mean
around the
now.
tools that you've discovered in the
Dude,
open world.
Asmongold's build, his first run was broken. That build for the DLC was fucking insane. He did nothing but stand behind that shield the whole time.
World is a really energizing way to play the game.
And it worked.
And it makes all these
I can't be mad,
extrinsic
it worked.
rewards in the open world that Joseph and Feeble complain
my
about
buddy did the
really
same thing.
useful. This is the experience Matthew was pining for. All the things Souls purists considered cheesy. They condemn people for using anything other than a melee-only, no consumables, no summons, no magic playstyle, while they also use this video as proof that Elden Ring is boring. Elden Ring gives you the experience Matthew is looking for more than any other game in the series. Matthew talks about firebombs against the Phalanx as a key example of what he wants. Has anyone had a look inside all the cookbooks you're complaining about? This works in exactly the same way. If you're bored of just doing dodge hit, do something else. There's so many other options. But even if we do put all of that aside, if I do just want to be reductive like Matthew and take Elden Ring at its most basic level, dodge hit. What's wrong with dodge hit? Take away all the power-ups from 2D Mario and consider it at its base level. What do you have? Run and jump. I could be really reductive and say that in 2D Mario, the run-jump gameplay hasn't been innovated on since the Nintendo Entertainment System, but simple does not mean bad.
Yeah,
This simple
exactly.
mechanic can be applied to an infinite number of situations. It's how we can have Mario Maker. You can make really, really difficult levels in it. If I play this level, has the Mario Maker
aim,
difficulty
shoot.
level arms race gotten to a point where my simple moveset is no longer appropriate for this situation? Do I not have the tools to deal with this? No, I can still
Damn.
run and jump to beat this. It's just real hard. In the same way that I can conquer any situation in Elden Ring with just dodge hit. Sometimes it's just really hard. It's not the same thing over and over again. Each boss has a completely individual moveset that requires a unique application of dodge hit.
It's not Mr.
I'm not
Suicide
doing the same
Salary,
thing
man.
over and over and over again for each boss. I'm using this simple moveset to deal with a variety of complex situations, and each situation requires a unique approach. Dodge hit doesn't become stale in the same way that run and jump doesn't become stale, in the same way fucking point shoot doesn't become stale. Running and jumping is why I'm here. It's why I'm playing Mario. But let's bring it back to Joe and how he intends to solve the problem of FromSoft becoming Bethesda. Let's go through some of the baffling suggestions he offers to stop that from happening. If you like the open-ended quest design that doesn't hold your hand, that you need to discover, and yes, you can miss. If you like that series staple that's been there since the beginning, Toxic. Why don't you want games to be good? Remember when those developers tweeted about this exact same thing on the base game's release and everyone lost their fucking minds? Remember that? He's arguing the same point. Literally the same point. If you like that you need to discover things for yourself, or interact and engage with the community in order to get through your journey, instead of having the game teach you what to do every step of the way, you're glazing. Toxic positivity. Why don't you want the game to be better? Joseph brings up the gank fights. He seems especially upset about this. That's just the later fight. That's it. In this fight,
What?
FromSoft does what they haven't done ever, which is to have an actual story in the DLC that is presented pretty clearly and culminates in actual climax featuring the NPCs that you've met along the way. Something that a lot of people have been asking for, including Joe, and they did it, and he hates it. Why? Because you fight more than one of them at the same time. That's it. I can understand if you don't like gank fights, but they're a thing. There is improvement and innovation here, but you're missing the forest for the trees. If you like the lore of this game, if you are connected to it and enjoy interpreting and deciphering these exciting little mysteries, this deep, interesting lore that's been a point of fascination for so many people for years and is celebrated for being brave enough to ask you to figure it out on your own instead of feeding it to you like a little baby that can't hold a spoon. If you like that, then you are glazing. It's toxic positivity. Why don't you want the game to be better? Joseph says that the series is repeating its themes and imagery. This is another idea that's in the Matthew Matosis video. I just don't agree. Yes, there are callbacks and there are nods, there are motifs that are repeated, but the aesthetic of Elden Ring is completely different to Sekiro, which is completely different to Bloodborne, which is completely different to Dark Souls. These are different worlds, they're different universes. It's so reductive to compare the differences of visual design between these games to Bethesda's work. I can't imagine looking at these beautiful vistas, the insane variety of locales, the music, the characters, the enemies, all the little details in the world that give it so much character and mystery, all the incredible work that FromSoft does to make these places feel individual, unique, and lived in, something that no other company in the industry today puts this much effort into. There is so much imagination. They could have just made Dark Souls 4 and 5 and 6 and so on. They didn't. They chose to create a whole new universe each time. And yes, Elden Ring is ostensibly part of the same series, but it's also really, really not. They did this for DLC, for downloadable content that could have been anything. It could have followed the same standard as previous games even, and just been a couple areas and 3 bosses, but they did so much more. They didn't have to, we would have bought it. They put so much work into this. There is so much love for this world, and Joseph is waving it away and calling it samey. Feeble calls the developers of the DLC absurdly lazy. It breaks my heart. Not only that, they're calling me and the people like me who disagree that this all needs to change toxic. They're calling us toxic for rightfully celebrating it, and it genuinely makes me really sad because people are responding to this and agreeing with them. Joseph goes on a tirade against the toxic positivity of fans that wave away problems by saying skill issue and get good, but the issues that he talks about here have absolutely nothing to do with skill. This isn't about difficulty or dodge hit or any of that. These aren't bugs that need to be fixed. They're not glitches. They're not performance issues. They're key design philosophies that have been baked into the game since the very beginning. They're the intended experience. They're not things that have been glazed over in cult-like toxic positivity. They're what makes Dark Souls, and Joseph Anderson doesn't like it. He never has. And it's fine if you don't like those things, Joseph, but don't tell me it's your responsibility as a critic to fix these things, and if I don't agree, then I'm part of the problem. Joseph doesn't understand these games. He has no right to tell Miyazaki how to make them, because he doesn't get it. But that doesn't matter, because he's loud, and he's angry, and yes, he's influential, and that's the real problem here. In other mediums, if you critique a book or a film, the artist doesn't hear you out and then release a new edition featuring your suggested changes. Now we have patches, we have DLC. Community outcry does have influence in how games are developed and updated. Maybe Joseph Anderson is responsible for you being able to ride your horse in the Elden Beast fight. Who are we to say? It was a popular video. Even if FromSoft didn't watch that video, millions of people did, and that number of consumers has real power. So now we're in a weird position. Is it now the critic's responsibility to rally the public for the implementation of change? Should the critic now be considered part of the development team? Are we part of the development team as consumers because we can review spam and write mean comments? If I find a way to enjoy these games, to work through these perceived faults, or find methods that invalidate the criticisms that Joseph has, then am I working against the prospect of them getting fixed because I'm not following the developer's intended experience, or at least how Joseph Anderson interprets the developer's intended experience? I didn't want to make this video because I'm angry at these critics for being snippy about a game I like. I wanted to make this video because they're actively changing the perception of people who play this game and convincing them that it works a certain way that it doesn't. They're swaying public opinion to a position that I ultimately feel is very misguided. And what's more, they're attempting to silence the people who disagree with them by calling them toxic. Joe, Feeble, you want to talk about insulating yourself away from criticism? You want to talk about not listening to feedback? You want to talk about toxicity? Fine. Let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
Hold on, let me make sure I've got the pin out of this hand grenade.
Oh, that was a lot. That was quite a lot.
He's not even done, bro. You just keep going, and I can't even blame him.
No, man, not at all. that was just a lot to absorb. Like I don't understand. I just don't like as we've said, we don't particularly like Shadow of the Erdtree. Like you like it less than I do, and I'm just kind of there's things I
Indifferent.
enjoy. Yeah, I would say I'm indifferent. Like there's things I really liked and there's things I didn't like. I like if again, this is just as a whole, I would much rather play Bloodborne, but that's just my personal like opinion of it, you know? Like I like Bloodborne more. Um I definitely like Old Hunters more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coming from the POV of two of the fights in Old Hunters sucking ass. One of them is whatever, and one's just awful. There's only 5 fights in it, but that's the point. Like,
Yeah.
I love Bloodborne because the whole package is something I love, even with the bad. And that's where I'm like, the subjectivity of games is so insane, and this video is actually making me realize that at the moment, which is kind of impressive. Like I already knew, obviously, but like I never thought about it too much or had a way of
Yeah,
expressing my opinions or feelings of it as
it never
concisely
really
as this.
hits you until the second you get to the he has a point.
Exactly, yeah.
Both Feeble King and Joseph Anderson call the people who disagree with them toxic in their new videos. Let's examine all the reasons why that is such an insanely hypocritical accusation. Let's get direct. Feeble King is toxic. He blames his audience for misinterpreting his analysis, but his analysis fails to communicate any clear, definitive point of view. He thinks this is the worst DLC, that it shouldn't exist, and he wouldn't recommend it, but it's also not terrible, but it is the worst, and better than the Dark Souls 2 DLC, which he hates. And just because he said in defense of Elden Ring, that doesn't mean he's wholly in love with it, but also it's his favorite game, and FromSoft games do make some of his favorite art, but he hates trial and error and memorizing movesets, but he's never changed his opinion about a game, but he has changed his opinion about significant parts of it. And if his audience don't correctly interpret his bizarre hypocritical opinions, they're toxic. The most toxic video game community ever, apparently. The most ridiculous example of Feeble saying his audience misinterpreted him is when he talks about the Death Knights and says this.
I don't and
Oh, here
never
we go.
said that I disliked the Death Knights. I kind of liked the Death Knights. I just mentioned them in a list with the NPC bosses that I disliked and people assumed.
Insane. And again, textbook gaslighting. What do you mean you included them in a list of things you didn't like and your audience assumed you didn't like them? What else are they supposed to assume? If you tell me something tastes like shit, am I supposed to assume you enjoy it? Do you enjoy the taste of shit? With
Yep.
the information that he presented in his critique, what assumption could his audience possibly come to? He's not only being
like
unreasonable,
what?
he's being toxic by deflecting the criticisms, genuine,
It's fucking
reasonable
silly.
criticisms, and putting it on them. He's calling them toxic, and that is classic gaslighting. Feeble says that he is sick of toxic commenters using straw man arguments. Well, let's see. What is a straw man argument? A straw man argument is when someone uses a distorted, weaker argument that is easier to refute than the one that is actually being presented. Kind of like Joseph Anderson at the top of his video sarcastically implying that people think he's Satan for telling them how to think, even though he does that all the time because he believes that he can make arguments about art that are irrefutable. He thinks he can prove his opinions. Joseph Anderson is the king of straw man arguments. Here are some examples of straw man arguments that Feeble makes in these 2 videos alone. When he was rightfully criticized for saying that the arguments made against him in favor of the game were as if they were cultists from the cult of FromSoft, Feeble says, I wasn't saying you were in a cult, I'm saying you were cult-like.
Yeah.
Feeble. No one was thinking you were literally saying they had joined a cult. No one is saying that you believe a religion has sprouted up in worship
And again, even then we were like, that shit's kind of harsh.
Miyazaki. No one is arguing that. That's not what people took issue with. What people took issue with was the fact that you insulted them. If someone calls you a donkey, the offense isn't that they've called you a literal donkey, an actual donkey like the animal. It's that they've insulted you. It was the intent, not the literal meaning of the word. How is you saying you're in a cult any different to you saying you're being cult-like? That is an extremely donkey-like thing to say. Obvious straw man argument. Feeble takes issue with someone saying that he should have used a higher damage weapon because he felt like bosses had too much health. Feeble says he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want the boss to be defeated in 9 or 10
that's your
hits.
problem.
Straw man. Obvious straw man argument. Of course, there is a middle ground between doing the damage he's doing here and killing a boss in 9 hits. One of Feeble's main criticisms in his original review was that bosses were overtuned and had too much health. If you don't want to do anything about that, that's your fault. You can't
Fucking exactly. Exactly. Like
Literally our entire thing
like
about,
one of our biggest problems with the series as a whole.
I'm so high without seven. Oh, I can't do it. Then fucking use Simmons.
Yeah. Like like I don't want to be like a hard ass and be like, don't complain about the difficulty if you're making it like difficult yourself. You know what I mean?
You're right, though. Don't complain about something that you're putting on yourself.
Yeah, I just it's just silly to me, you know? Like you could not enjoy the fight, but when you're complaining about like the damage you're dealing when it comes to like you actively having the tools to do better, and I'm specifically talking about Elden Ring because you can just switch builds anytime. It's not like the older games where you might just be locked into something, you know? Like, you can do whatever you fucking want in Elden Ring. He's the only one limiting himself in this game. That's why Elden Ring is so good, like we were talking about. You have options.
Can't complain that enemies have too much health and then say you don't want to do more damage. That's not a problem with the game. That's just stubbornness. That comment Feeble is responding to is absolutely right. It's Feeble that is being toxic here by deflecting that argument and blaming the commenter.
Been my favorite part of this video, to be honest.
That is using a straw man argument. When Feeble brings up the accusation that he plays up his negativity for views, that he is rage baiting, he says this.
Maybe I'm trying to keep up the pacing of the video and I don't want to talk about things I find boring. Or, what if I'm an evil grifter sent from outer space to convince the people of Earth that FromSoft fell off?
I mean, bro, I don't even have to say much about this one. How can you put this in your video and then accuse your audience of straw man arguments in the same breath? This lack of self-awareness is genuinely shocking. Feeble takes issue with commenters saying his criticisms are made in bad faith. Here is the definition of bad faith: the psychological phenomenon where one acts inauthentically. This entire style of criticism is built on bad faith arguments. If you love a game and your entire critique is shitting on it, then it is an inauthentic critique. That critique is not true to your actual critical analysis of the game, or it's only a fraction of your actual analysis, in which case it is still inauthentic because you didn't present it as a fraction of your analysis. You presented it as your critique. It doesn't represent how you actually feel. If you didn't think it was terrible, then your review is in bad faith because that's not the critique that you present. You're either making your arguments in bad faith or you are a bad critic. Pick one. You made a bad video and you angered your audience. Then you made a follow-up review gaslighting your audience that actually they got it all wrong and they misinterpreted you and they're being toxic. Despite spending your career nitpicking and tearing apart the games you critique, when people do that in your comments, you flip out. That is a double standard. If you feel they are being toxic, then you need to come to terms with the fact that you are. You do all the things that you accuse them of and more, and you are not immune to criticism. Joseph Anderson, let's get direct. You are not a game designer. You aren't part of the FromSoft team. It is not your responsibility to help them to get good. It is not your responsibility to give them lovely little gifts of constructive criticism. It is your responsibility as a critic to critique. You are not in the business of game development. You are in the business of games journalism. If you want to fix FromSoft, then go fill out a job application and send them a resume. I am also not a games designer. I'm not part of the FromSoft team. If I love a game and want to enjoy it, it is not my responsibility to keep silent about that positivity so that the games company doesn't become complacent. Don't tell me that if I disagree with you, I'm halting progress. That's not my job, and it's not yours. I play video games. That's it. Let me enjoy things. When I tell you that some of the criticisms that you make about how the game works are flawed, I'm not criticizing your skill as a player. I'm not telling you to get good at FromSoft games. I am
Okay, real quick. I gotta say this because there are people who do this. There are people who do this. And what I was saying earlier was there are people who legitimately do that, and that is their defense of anyone's, complaints. Is that, and it's fucking annoying. Like, even if, like, you're like me, if say like you're complaining about Radon, right? Promise Consort Radon. You beat him, and someone still told you that in response to you complaining about something about the fight that you did not like. Your response isn't going to be anything other than, wow, this guy's kind of fucking annoying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, how Joseph Anderson responded to that was in the worst way possible. But just wanted to mention that. It's like, it's still really goddamn annoying to be told that, even though you've actually done it.
Mm-hmm. We'll just get good for, like, beating the game.
Yeah.
No summons.
Like, I don't have to, like, I don't have to get good. I just don't like it. It's like in Guilty Gear. Like, I don't like pot. I don't want to get good at the game. I just don't like fighting this person. You don't need to get good at something to not like it.
telling you to get good at critique. Get good, Joseph. If you can say that to FromSoft, there is no reason why I shouldn't be able to say it to you.
And
Don't
yeah,
give it.
And he did say it.
If you can't take it. You completely misunderstand the key concepts of what makes these games what they are. You're allowed to dislike it. You're not just saying, this isn't for me. You're saying, this isn't for me, and it should be, so let's change it. And anyone that doesn't like your suggestions of change are engaging in toxic positivity. Well, that's just toxic. That's just regular toxicity. Everything you say in this section of the review is far more toxic than any get good skill issue comment will ever be. Most of what you say in a good deal of your reviews is more toxic than anyone telling you that you are bad at the game. You're not fighting against the big bad games company. You're not rallying against the dominant voices in the community who are trying to tear you down. You're not raging against the machine. You are one of the most dominant voices in the community. You're not a victim. You're an incredibly successful internet critic that has thus far encountered very little controversy. When you do get the slightest bit of blowback, you can't handle it at all because you can't handle criticism. But you're not just toxic to the people who disagree with you. You're not just toxic to the developers of the games you critique. You're toxic to your own fans, Joseph.
Yeah.
Your fans have been waiting on a review from you for almost 5 years. A review that has taken so long that you had to shut down your Patreon because it kept getting delayed and your fans were getting angry. Your entire Reddit is filled with posts memeing you about it. It's the only thing they post there.
Damn.
You've had to make it a constant joke in your videos so that you can laugh it off instead of actually doing the work to finish it. That's toxic positivity. You gave a deadline that if you didn't release it at the end of last year, that you would delete your channel. Then you didn't, and you made this post saying, you guys are being weird. Why are they being weird? Because he didn't follow through on the deadline. Textbook gaslighting. This must be something you do a lot because your fans predicted this exact thing would happen. They're well within their rights to be angry with you when you made them a promise and
Oh my
broke
God.
it. Accusing them of behaving weirdly when it's you that is in the wrong is textbook gaslighting. Joseph says here that, oh, actually the deadline worked and it's 90% done. This was almost a year ago. He also says this, well, technically I could just delete my channel and then undelete it because haha, you didn't say I couldn't do that, lawyered. Or I could just write my channel in a text document and delete that. Then
That irritates me. That irritates the hell out of me, low-key. Because it's like, dude, you're not going to do that. Like, stop. You're not going to do that. You're making bank by doing this shit.
Just needless empty threads.
Needless, fucking toxic, empty-ass threads.
Then you told people that you might delete it anyway just to spite them and ban anyone that gave
but
you
you
trouble.
won't.
A fan of yours, a fan, put a post online to tell you that it didn't need to be perfect and they would be stoked just to see what you worked on if it was really that close to being finished because they like you and thoroughly enjoy your
That's
work.
crazy.
And you told them, no, fuck off. How's
Wow.
God.
Wow, that's
that for being
crazy.
insulated against criticism? This person deleted their account. That must have been awful for them to hear. They loved you, man. What an awful thing to say to one of your own fans. You could have just said nothing if that post annoyed you. But you didn't. You lashed out for no other reason than to make that dude feel bad. Why? You work for your audience. They pay for you to enjoy the
Yeah,
life you
literally.
live. Why treat them this way? How are you going to criticize game developers who spend years making quality products when you can't even finish a video roasting them? This DLC review is an hour and a half long. The game came out not that long ago. Why didn't you work on this instead? What is taking so long on this? Your fans who support you deserve to know. Listen to
They
them
literally,
and stop
they fucking make their Patreons for that. That what?
threatening to ban them if they criticize you. Joseph, your style of critique consists of telling games developers the laundry
Guinevere.
list of reasons you think they've failed, and when someone
Guinevere
suggests that
spotted.
you're bad at video games, you chuck a massive public hissy fit. You call them children and losers and toxic, and you berate them for not agreeing with the problems that you think are problems. Joseph, you are extremely toxic. Get a grip and listen to the people who are criticizing you. Open all those lovely little gifts you're getting. For anyone else in the Joseph Anderson school of destructive criticism, when I say I don't want any more of this style of critique, I'm not saying that I want positive critiques. I'm not saying that I want critics that agree with my perspective. I'm saying I don't want to watch any more 1-hour videos where at the end of it I have no idea how the person actually feels because it's swamped in smug entitlement that is cynically designed to rage bait the algorithm. If the whole world is pressuring IGN to do better because their opinions have devolved into constant, safe 8 out of 10 reviews, we need to do the same for this bland, copy-paste, zero-value amateur game design. These critics need to get good. I have my biases. Subjectivity is implied. There is no law stating what critique should or shouldn't be. We can't even agree on the definition of the word. I hope I've at least provided enough to support my argument of why it shouldn't be what it is, but that's up to you. I think this style of critique has real significant problems, but you may feel it's fine. I don't know. You may want critiques of video games to be focused only on potential improvements. There is no right way, and art and the way we discuss it does evolve over time. But I'm passionate about my position, and I reserve my right to speak out against it. No one is above criticism. I don't think there's anything that I've said here that is in tone or content more hostile than anything they've said about the games they critique. If we disagree, then that's fine. You're well within your right. But I don't mean any ill will to these people. Even if it seems that way, I just want them to stop doing what they're doing because I do think it's toxic. If this does kick up a discussion, always remember there's a person on the other side of the screen.
Yeah.
Emotions come up when we discuss something we're passionate about. I'm sure mine bubbled up at times throughout the video. I was definitely pretty snarky and pretentious. I'm self-aware. We love this stuff, or we hate it. We have strong feelings either way. But at the end of the day, we're arguing about video games. The stakes are pretty low. Do try and take it down a peg. If you get the urge to wish cancer on someone, discussion is healthy. This kind of debate is essential for culture to develop. It's important. Criticism is important. You can absolutely comment and tell me if you feel I've taken things too far with some of my points, or if you feel that I've been unfair. If it turns out I have made any errors here or misrepresented anyone, I'll write amendments in the description or pin comments below. I'm not presenting the arguments in this video as objective truth. There is no such thing as objective truth in the interpretation of art or artistic discussion. There is nothing that I've said here today that is irrefutable. There is nothing that is proven. I've given it, I can take it. If you are struggling with this game or any other games like it, and you feel frustrated and you want to rage, do try to put the focus inward. That's not me telling you to get good or that you have a skill issue. It's about acknowledging that things can be difficult and you have to work for it sometimes. That's what Miyazaki stated as the developer intent, the intended experience to struggle and overcome. It's a great life lesson, and facing challenges in this way and not flipping out and blaming the external is a really helpful mindset that does need to be developed over time with trial and error. You have to be okay with making errors to overcome the trial. It's about being mindful of your biases and perception. It's about resilience, self-esteem, and control. It's about learning. It's a knowledge issue. Keep playing video games, keep talking about them, and be cool about it. But more than anything, please, 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 have a great day.
You're beautiful.
That was a good video. What did you think?
I mean, he hit it right on the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he just hit it right on the money. He said a lot of stuff I had been thinking about, just the FromSoft fans in general. Also, the way he managed to tell him to basically say, yeah, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And just with proof was, yeah.
No, it was perfect. It was such a good video. It really was. Oh. Uh-oh. There we go.
Our next video.
Yep. Our next video. Oh. Oh boy. Oh jeez. There's a video for me. No, I quite enjoyed that video. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
Did you quite enjoy it?
I quite enjoyed it. Let's see here.
FromSoft player base.
No, I mean, again, if I do end up posting this, which I probably will, we'll see. But check out Gred Glintstone again. This was a really well put together video.